Welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, a podcast shared by David Roylance. This podcast is dedicated to guiding you to completely eliminate the discontent mind and the suffering it causes by attaining enlightenment. Learn and practice the teachings of Gautama Buddha that will guide you to fully attain a peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. To support this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha or visit buddhadailywisdom.com, where you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online learning resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Now, here's our teacher to share more.
Okay, I'm going to start by just saying good morning to all of you guys. Sawadee Kap, welcome, good morning. We're going to start with our meditation like we do each morning. We're going to be doing loving kindness meditation. And now that we've done it several times, I'm just going to do it without even giving you the guidance on the breathing mindfulness meditation. We'll just do the guidance for the loving kindness meditation. So it'll be chanting, then you do your own breathing mindfulness meditation. I'll come in with the guidance on the loving kindness, and then you can go back to the breathing mindfulness on your own without me prompting that. And then we'll come out with the chanting, okay? Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakawa Potang Mahakawanang Apiwate Sawakato Mahakawata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Sāvaka Saṅkho Saṅghang Namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Mahakawa Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokavito Anutero Purisa Dhammasati Satatawa Manusanang Bhutto Bhagavati. Continuing to breathe in through the nose and out through the nose. Repeat these affirmations in the mind on the out breath. May I be peaceful. May I be safe. May I be well. May I be free of all discontentedness in the suffering it causes. May my family, friends, co-workers, and neighbors all be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness in the suffering it causes. May all those who I come into contact with today be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness in the suffering it causes. May all those who hate me be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness in the suffering it causes. May all beings, wherever they reside, be peaceful. May all beings be safe. May all beings be well. May all beings be free of discontentedness in the suffering it causes. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Bhutang Bhagavanang Abhivateyami Savakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakatoro Kawitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusanang Bhutto Bhagavati. Okay, if you'd like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, welcome to everyone here at the temple. Welcome to everyone online who's joining us as well. Nice to see you all this morning. We have this topic that I'm going to share with you here in a moment, but before we do, I'd like to just open up to any questions that you guys might have about your meditation practice, because at this point you've been meditating for a number of days, and I've been helping you build up your loving kindness meditation and your breathing mindfulness meditation. So I'd like to give you guys an opportunity to ask any and all questions that you like about meditation. If you're having any challenges or struggles or any just clarification that you need, you can use the microphones here at the temple, or those of you guys online, you can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like by just unmuting. So are there any questions around meditation that you guys would like to ask?
Yeah, I have one question regarding the breathing itself. So we don't have to breathe consciously, right? So my struggle is that when I may be able to just like not control my breathing, then like my mind wanders around more than when I focus on controlling the pace. I don't know how to find that balance.
Yeah. So what I share when I'm guiding is I say, develop a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath, meaning you're going to need to develop what I'm describing, that oftentimes we're not breathing in the way that would be wise for meditation. I know that for me, when I was breathing initially, I was breathing really shallow. So I had to like train the body to breathe nice and calmly, nice and steadily. So you might actually have to do some of that where you're training the body to be able to breathe like this, because I was breathing Because if you're breathing that way and your mind's connected to the breath and fixated on the breath, your mind's going to be overactive. And this is what I noticed, is that my mind was overactive because I was focused on this breath that was moving really rapidly. So when I slowed the breath down, it slowed the mind down. So I needed to do outside of meditation. I just sat on my bed and I just got used to breathing nice and slow. And then there's a gap that you can create between the in-breath and the out-breath, and where you're not doing a breathing in or out, and getting comfortable with that gap, and then really slow on the way out, because it even helped me let go of any fear of death to a certain degree, because in that little gap where I wasn't breathing at all, I had this fear, like, oh my goodness, I'm not going to be able to survive. I'm going to die without taking this breath. So you would like to develop this nice, steady, consistent breath. But then eventually you are just doing it naturally, that is just happening naturally. So it might feel a little bit like you are kind of controlling it at first, but then once you get it really well developed, you'll be able to just do this naturally. I can't hear you. Oh yeah, practicing this outside of meditation?
Yes, that's a good idea. Thank you.
And you can just do it with your eyes open, just sitting there like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and not doing anything with your mind, just sitting there and just focusing on getting the breath really well established. And then after 5-10 minutes or so, then just close your eyes and try to do a little bit of meditation with that breath that you've now established. And then in the future, try to get to that same point after you're chanting, then just try to get that breath. Because that chanting, you need to be aware of the breath, easing into the meditation. That's one of the things it's helping you to do, is get awareness of mind and awareness of the breath. So now, right after that, you can just go into meditation and have that awareness of the breath, a nice, steady, gradual breath.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Another question. Sometimes I kind of like fix my mind, and then I'm breathing, I'm so relaxed, and then I tend to start like falling asleep, getting too relaxed. So what to do with that?
Yeah, this is where you like to stay attentive and alert with the upper body. If you keep your upper body erect, this will tend to keep the mind attentive and alert. If that's not working, then you might need to switch to a standing position or a walking position. These are the other positions, and these are one of the things that those are good for. The standing position is great to keep the mind attentive and alert, and the walking position is good for that too. They're also good for other things as well, but they're also good for this.
Okay, and last question. I remember in previous courses with you that you recommended us not to time our meditation practice, but rather just to check, how long we meditated, just like starting the clock or the timer, and then we feel that we need to stop. So sometimes, when do I know that I need to stop?
Yeah, so what Alberto is referring to is that I don't suggest you set an alarm when you actually meditate, because when you set an alarm, your mind's going to be sitting there thinking, is it time yet? Is it time yet? Is it time yet? Is it time yet? And this is the mind craving, and you're trying to get rid of that. Or the other thing is, you'll be deep in meditation, getting all kinds of benefit, and then your alarm will go off, and you're like, whoa, I could have gotten so much more benefit if I didn't set my alarm. In some situations, you're going to need to set an alarm, right? If you're on your way to work and you only have 20 minutes to meditate, you might need to set it. But in the evenings, on the weekends, you can do this without setting the alarm. So what I suggest you do is that you look at the time before you start, right? Like 9:05 is, when we started meditation essentially today. And then you meditate and you do whatever meditation you're going to do. And then you look at the time, 9:25. So I meditated for 20 minutes. So you'll know how long, because you'd like to expand this to get closer and closer to 30 minutes. And that's where you'll see the most benefit. So the way that you'll know is just meditate. And whenever you think that it's time to come out of the meditation, come out. There's nothing that's going to prompt you to come out of meditation. Just stay in meditation for whatever amount of time you think is fine. And what you'll notice is sometimes it'll feel like you've been meditating for 5 minutes, and you'll look and it's been like 30, 45 minutes. It's like, whoa, seemed like it was such a short meditation. And other times it'll feel like you've been meditating an hour and it's only been 10 minutes, right? So you just kind of like go with the flow, whatever it is. Don't force yourself. So there's nothing that's going to prompt you to come out of meditation. Just meditate for whatever amount of time you feel like you need, and then just come out. Yeah, you're welcome. Leo?
Still have problems with when I do the phrases and how I see these persons I do love and kindness to, how I picture them in my mind. I have a bit difficulties. I think you said once, you told me how you did it, like with honey or something.
As you're doing these affirmations, one of the things you can do to help you is you can visualize the person or the group of people, because you're probably going to be doing, may Rebecca be peaceful. You know what Rebecca looks like. You've been around her. You spend time with her. Even if you're no longer around her anymore, even if she's in the past, you can envision like Rebecca sitting in front of you or standing in front of you. And one of the things I would do is I would envision this molasses, because molasses is like very thick and it kind of syrup kind of going over the body. Because what the Buddha teaches you is he teaches you to envelop the mind with loving kindness, or fill it up or permeate the mind. And he talks about enveloping others with loving kindness. So this visualization can help some people, but if it's not helping you and you're not interested in doing, then you don't have to do it, but it's something that can aid you. So just in your mind's eye, just visualize this person and then this molasses or this thick syrup just coming over their body from their head all the way over their body. And if that helps you, use it. If it's not helping you, then don't use it.
Would you suggest to have in this, if I don't choose that, does a person should smile, or should it have a natural look, or maybe it looks angry as I know it and I learn to be
up to
this
you.
Look?
Up to
it's
you.
Not important.
Yeah, up to you what you envision their face to look like. Other questions?
Yes, please. So during the loving kindness meditation, it's quite easy to have pleasant bodily sensations sometimes. And should we cut them off as conditional?
Yeah, any bodily sensations that are coming up like that, they're conditional. So you'd like to cut them off and let them go. What you will notice sometimes is you might notice some kind of like tingling in the back of your neck and some tingling over your head, like the loving kindness. You can feel the mind starting to permeate with loving kindness. If it's unconditional love, you won't be able to cut it off and let it go, because there's no condition that's creating it. So it's not possible for you to cut it off. So if you're like constantly trying to cut it off and it won't get off, it won't come out, then that means it's this unconditional love, this loving kindness that's permeating in your mind. So if you're noticing any kind of conditional experiences, you would like to try to cut them off. And if you're not sure, just try to cut it off. And if you're not able to, then more likely than not, it's the unconditional love that's permeating in the mind. And you would like to just continue to allow that to permeate during your meditation, and even afterwards, go out in the world with that loving kindness towards all beings.
When it comes to focusing on the breath, that meditation, there are times when I think, wait, am I now becoming attached to the breath? It almost feels like there are times when I kind of go in and out of this attachment with the breath needing to be a certain way. And so, I mean, I know that that's kind of our goal, to focus on the breath and cutting off body sensations, feelings, thoughts, that kind of thing. But then, I mean, are we kind of replacing one attachment with another?
No, so it's not just the fact that you're focusing on the breath that would mean that it would be an attachment. The attachment would be the longing and yearning for it. So say your mind moved off the breath and you noticed that, and you got discontent because your mind moved off the breath. Then you know you're being attached to the breath. Mm-hmm. So it's not just the fact that you're focused on the breath that is the attachment. It's the mind longing, yearning for it. Let me give you this example. I think this will help you. I don't think you've heard me share this before. Your mind can actually be attached to anything and everything. It's not the object that is the attachment. It's the mind's longing, yearning for it. So if you were going on a hike and you had a liter of water that you needed to take on this hike, and you had it in your car, and you were driving to the trailhead of this hike, and now you get out on the hike and you left your bottle of water in the car, and you're 30 minutes into your hike, and you're supposed to be out there for 6 or 8 hours, and you're like, oh my goodness, oh my God, I forgot my water. And you're like, hurry up and go back to your car, maybe twist your ankle along the way, kind of sling open your door of your car like, water, 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 water. In this case, the mind is attached because it's longing and yearning. It's not the object, but it's the mind longing and yearning. Because another person could have that same liter of water in their car. They could forget their water, be 30 minutes into their hike, and say, I forgot my water. I'm going to be out here for like 6 or 8 hours. I should probably go get that. Let me turn around and go get that water. And now you just calmly make your way back to your car, open the door. Okay, got my water. Let's go on the hike. right? In this situation, the object's exactly the same. It's what the mind's doing that's different. There's the longing and yearning, which produces all this unskillful conduct, which leads to the spraining of the ankle and slinging open the door and all this rattled mind. But then there's just choosing to go get the water. So you can choose to focus on the breath without a craving, desire, attachment. Just the fact that you're focused on the breath doesn't mean that it's an attachment. It's how the mind is longing and yearning potentially and holding on to it. And the way that you'll know for sure with 100% certainty that there's any craving, desire, attachment in the mind is if there's discontentedness. That's the red light. That's the indicator, because there can't be discontentedness if there isn't a craving, desire, attachment. So whenever you see discontentedness, that's why I taught you to look inward and look to identify your cravings. So if you're noticing that you're focused on the breath, and when the mind moves off the breath, you become discontent and frustrated, then you are attached to the breath, being on the breath, but that doesn't mean you should stop doing it. It means that you need to eliminate that longing and yearning and realize that being on the breath is impermanent. You're not going to be able to permanently be on the breath. It's not possible. If you are able to permanently focus on the breath, then that means the universal truth of impermanence is not a universal truth. So when you're focused on the breath, if the mind moves off, and you notice discontentedness, okay, you're attached to the breath. But now what you're doing is you're training your mind to let that go and say, hey, this isn't permanent. My mind's going to move off every once in a while. Let me just bring it back. Let me just let that go and come back. So you're not replacing anything. You're just choosing to focus on the breath and build that concentration to be able to focus on a single object. Now, some people are taught, and the Buddha didn't teach this, but some people are taught when you have a thought or you have a feeling to look at it or to label it, or some people call it noting, if you've heard this. Some people, they teach when you're meditating and you have a thought that you should think thought, right? Or if you're angry, think angry. Right? Or some people teach you counting, that you count backwards. Or some people here in Thailand, they'll teach you to say, put to, when you're meditating. This is replacing whatever thought you would have had with another thought. And your mind hasn't actually let go in this case. But in the case of focusing on your breath, you're not producing a thought. You're just focusing your mind on the breath. But if you were to insert into your mind like counting or labeling or noting or this puto, whatever thought you would have had, you're just replacing it with something else, and your mind hasn't actually let go in this situation. But if you can just focus your mind on the breath, not having any particular thought or not inducing a thought like puto or counting, then your mind is letting go because it's just focused on the breath. And that's what you would ultimately like to get to. So while there's a lot of people teaching lots of different meditation techniques out there, it's not necessarily what the Buddha taught, even if it's at a temple, even if it's at a retreat, even if it's an ordained practitioner, because not everybody studies with the original teachings of the Buddha. You were in the foundational class where I showed you the original words of the Buddha, where he talks about cutting off thoughts with breathing mindfulness meditation. So there you can see what he originally taught. And if you look at volume 7 of the book series, this is a consolidated collection of all the teachings of the Buddha about breathing mindfulness meditation. You can see how he guides students in meditating. You can see his exact words, and you can see what I'm teaching you is right in line with that, where other places that you might go that aren't basing their teachings on the original teachings, they will teach this puto, or counting or labeling or noting and things like this. And this is actually not allowing you to cultivate the mindfulness and concentration and the ability to let go. So those types of meditations aren't going to lead to enlightenment. And the Buddha talked about this during his life. He mentioned that if you ever learn something from somebody that conflicts with his teachings and what he taught, that you should ignore that, and you should consider that this person has misunderstood his teachings. And he also said that changing his teachings is the most detrimental thing you could ever do. It's going to create harm for you, and it's going to create harm for countless people. But again, not everybody reads his original teachings and learns his original teachings, and they don't even necessarily know that they've actually changed the teachings or the teachings have been changed. So as you get back to the original teachings of the Buddha, you can see what he taught, and then do that, and you'll see that that's what produces the improved qualities of mind. Where these other things, they are not going to produce enlightenment because the mind's not building the qualities that it needs, which is awareness of mind, concentration, and the ability to let go.
And then when it comes to focusing on the cadence of the longer breaths, right? So I guess step one is to kind of breathe in a more long breath, relaxed fashion. Is it kind of like equal parts? Because some people will say, for breathing, it's better to have a longer exhale compared to the inhale. Is there anything about that you've experienced or?
No, I wouldn't suggest to look at it that closely and get that detailed with it. The Buddha, when you look at his guidance, he says that if you're breathing short, know that you're breathing short. If you're breathing long, know that you're breathing long. So essentially bring your mind to the breath is what he's teaching you, because each person's lungs are different sizes. We have different capacities because of impermanence, right? So not everybody's going to be able to breathe the same amount of time or the same length of time or the same type of breath. And each time you breathe, it's going to be different too. And sometimes it's going to be longer or shorter. Generally, the pace of the breath, if you pay attention to the pace, the length of the breath isn't important. As the Buddha shares, if it's short, know that it's short. If it's long, know that it's long. But the pace of the breath, you would like to pay attention to that. So it should be like, so it should be like that pace. But how long or short it is going to be different based on lung capacity. But the pace can be similar. And then you need to train the body to be able to do this type of pace.
And then, our goal is to try to maintain this pace to kind of be more in control without attachment throughout the entire breathing mindfulness meditation.
Yeah, and getting it to a point where you don't have to control it, that it's just a natural breath. Like now, for me, this is just a natural breath. And it's not to say that I breathe this way in day-to-day life, but when I get into meditation, it just happens naturally. I can just naturally breathe this way, where before it wasn't natural. So I did need to train the body to be able to breathe this way. And then once I did, now it's natural. So that's when I share guidance in meditation. I say, develop a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath, or establish a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath, because oftentimes the body isn't breathing this way when you first start doing meditation.
And then there are times when, just say if I've slept enough versus not sleeping enough, my mind will deviate more than usual. And I guess that's just a quality of not having enough rest or nutrition, or kind of taking care of my health kind of thing. So I'm guessing that that's normal. That is not always mind over matter, so to speak. There is something to be said for taking care of our bodies and sleeping well and eating well, and that improving our mental strength, I guess.
Yeah, this is part of the wisdom, right? The Buddha teaches you the wisdom of how to purify your mind, how to get to enlightenment, how to understand the natural laws of existence. He teaches you all these kind of things. And then with that purified mind, you're going to discover all kinds of other wisdom about this body, about this mind, and about the world. He doesn't teach you every single little thing. He's teaching you what pollutions you have in your mind, how to get rid of them. He teaches you about this natural laws of existence. And then as you clear out your mind, you're going to discover many things along the path that the Buddha never taught. He didn't teach it to you because he didn't have to teach it to you, because he knew you would discover it on your own. And the unfortunate thing is that some people, when they're discovering those things, their conceit can arise and they can think that they're smarter than the Buddha. But the Buddha just didn't teach you those things because he knew you would discover them on your own, that he didn't have to teach you every last little tiny thing. Or a student can think they're smarter than their teacher, or wiser than their teacher because, wow, look at all these things that they've learned. Well, your teacher knows those things too. They discovered them along the path too, but they just didn't teach it to you because they knew you would figure it out on your own. all they're teaching you is the core central teachings of how to get rid of this pollution. So things like how much sleep you should have, or types of foods to eat and things like this, you will figure all that stuff out along the way. The Buddha's not going to give you the complete recipe. He's going to give you the complete recipe of how to get to enlightenment, but not the complete recipe about how much time you need to sleep each day, or, you know, what types of food you need to eat. Like last night, I was just telling my son, I noticed that when I eat sweets in the evening, I tend to urinate more. And I don't know if that's true for everybody, but I think there's something that the body produces a certain amount of insulin, and that produces urine and these kinds of things. And I heard a doctor talking about this one time, and this is what I noticed about my own body. Like if I don't eat sweets at night, I don't really wake up in the middle of the night to use the restroom. Whereas if I eat some sweets, I will tend to start urinating quite a bit. And these are the kind of things that the Buddha doesn't teach you, but you just observe about the body. You just kind of notice this cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect. This is constantly what the Buddha is teaching you, is this cause and effect. And you start seeing this cause and effect in many different parts of your life. And this is where you're able to now clue into the natural law of karma, that the Buddha is teaching you about the natural law of karma, and he's teaching some major aspects of it. But then you're going to see a lot of individual details and discover these on your own, because your mind is now alerted to this natural law and you can pay attention to it.
Sorry, last question on
you don't have to apologize for questions. If your teacher gets frustrated that their students are asking questions, you should probably find a new teacher.
It's fair. It's fair. Maybe the Canadian in me. When it comes to focusing on the breath, and this might be my attachment to getting this right. When it comes to focusing on the breath, you know, there are times when I do focus on the sensation of kind of air in my nostrils, feeling my lungs expanding, right? Which is more of like a body sensation, visceral kind of thing. There are times when my mind kind of jumps to almost visualizing air. It just feels like I'm creating a thought about what it might look like, or that kind of thing. So when we talk about focus on the breath, I mean, I don't want to say what's right, what's wrong, but kind of what was the intention of the breathing mindfulness meditation? Was it more a connection with what the body senses, or does it just not matter?
You mean, what are the goals of breathing mindfulness meditation?
The exact thing that the mind is focusing on and connecting to.
Okay. It's focusing on the sound of the breath, or the sensation of the air coming over the skin into the nose. That's the fixation that you're focusing on.
Nothing about lung expansion, nothing about the feeling of air coming in. Is strictly up in this space here.
Yeah. The thing about the untrained and unenlightened mind is it's like a wild animal. If there was a bunch of wild animals in the forest and the animal trainer went into the forest, what do you think the animals would do? They would run, right? They're going to run, right? Because here comes the animal trainer. Your mind's going to do the same thing, because there's the body, there's the mind, and then there's the person. And the person's trying to train the mind. And the mind's like, I'm out of here. I'm getting out of here. So your mind's going to try to run around and try to figure out all kinds of things. Let me focus on this. Let me do this. Let me do that. Let me do this. It's not going to want to do what this person is interested in doing, which is focus on the breath. So it's going to try to find all these erroneous things to do and look at and frolic in the forest and do all these kinds of things. And you're like, no, I'm going to tame you. You need to come over here and focus on the breath. The mind's like, nah, I'm out of here, man. I'm going to focus on this and that and this and that. So you need to be very attentive to that and get the mind to be disciplined and controlled by bringing it back to that breath, and realize it's going to try to run around on you and try to find anything and anything that it can do. It's going to try to convince you, no, let's stay on Facebook. No, meditate. No, let's watch this TV program. Oh man, there's this great massage place down the street. Let's go do that. Oh, let's go have some food. You know, there's this new place. And then even once you're in meditation, it's going to be trying to find the exit door as soon as it can, right? So it's just like that wild animal. So the being on the breath is disciplining it to say, no, get back over here, get back over here, get back over here. And it's going to take many months to do that. It's not going to be like a 1 week or 1 month or 2 month thing, and your mind's going to be well disciplined. It's going to take many months and years to get this mind disciplined. So just like everything else, you can't be an expert at it in just a couple of months or even a couple of years. Like, you're in the IT field and you're probably pretty proficient in that, but it took you many years to build up to that.
Any tips or recommendations on trying to maintain this mindfulness throughout the day? Because I find that during the breathing mindfulness meditation, we're here, we're training, but then out there, I mean, it's easy to be distracted or drawn towards different smells, sights, sounds, that kind of thing. So in the online and offline world of distraction, people kind of trying to pull our attention, how do we maintain our mindfulness? Yeah, in that realm.
Sure. So there's two different things here. There's mindfulness, which is awareness of mind. And then there's concentration, which is the focus and clarity. So you would like to be practicing both of these all throughout your day. And the Buddha talks about, and I can confirm with you that this is what you need to do, is practice mindfulness all day long. And that mindfulness is your guard. This is what's guarding the mind. You need to guard the mind, because anytime you have contact through the 6 sense bases, if you have craving, desire, attachment in your mind, there's the potential for discontentedness to arise. So your mindfulness should just be always on. From the moment you're first starting to wake up and gain your awareness, all day long, and even when you're going to sleep at night, because your thoughts can invade you. When you're waking up in the morning or when you're dozing off at night, your thoughts can invade you, and you need that mindfulness to be that guard. So it's guarding the doorways to discontentedness. I can give you some examples of this if you like, but then also with that mindfulness or awareness of mind, you need to be focused, you need to be concentrated. And that's where the more you do it, it's like that wood and the steel rod that's going back and forth. So when you're here listening to me talk and you see your mind wandering and thinking about lunch, you cut that off and bring it back. Or maybe you're physically here in the class, but your mind's thinking about what you're going to do after class. You got to cut that off and bring it back. And more as you're doing this, the mind will be focused and concentrated, and then you can have more and more awareness of mind. So the meditation is helping you cultivate that awareness of mind and concentration, but then you practice it in your day-to-day life all the time. There was this time, I'll just give you an example, is when I was trying to get rid of coffee, and I had thought that this craving had been eliminated, because I went like 3, 4, 5 days without one, and then I had one, and then I went a week or 2 without one, and then I had one, and then I had like 3 or 4 weeks, and then I had one, and then I was up to 8 weeks. And I was feeling all proud of myself. I was like, wow, look at me. I got rid of this coffee craving. I started getting conceitful. And I was just walking down the street thinking about how I gotten rid of this craving. I was feeling all great about myself. And I turned the corner and I got this whiff of a coffee shop. And boom, I was right in the coffee shop, standing in line. And I was standing in line behind this group of people. And I was telling myself, like, why are you doing this? You're going to have a headache for like 2 or 3 days. Your mind's going to be overactive. Like, this is really silly. You should just leave the coffee shop. Why are you even here? This is silly. You've gotten rid of this craving. And I just standing there, like, talking to myself the whole time. And then when I got up to the front, I was like, iced coffee, please. My mind, the craving was just too strong. So then I got the coffee and I sat down, and then I drank about a third of it. And then I realized, like, hey, this is silly, and I threw it away. And then I was like, I'm never having a coffee again. And that was the last coffee I ever had. But then afterwards, because I used that process of cutting off and cutting off and cutting off, and then I looked inward and I was like, what's going on here? What led to me getting into this coffee shop? Well, I realized I wasn't guarding my doorways. I wasn't guarding the nose. That odor came in, and I had a craving for that, and that arose this craving, and now I went into the coffee shop. So now, having that insight and having that wisdom, I started functioning differently. When I would walk down the street, I would keep my eye out ahead of me if there was any coffee shops or any coffee vendors, and there were some times where I needed to cross the street and get on the other side, so I couldn't smell it. And I had to do this for a period of time because my mind was still sensitive, and that craving was still in the mind. So I did this for a period of time where I got farther and farther away from this coffee, and I consciously made the choice to sometimes cross the street because I wasn't interested in smelling that odor. And that was the guard that I was guarding the mind. And then ultimately I got to the point where the craving was completely gone. Now sometimes students invite me to coffee shops, and they're like, hey, I would like to have a chat with you. I need some help. Can you meet me at this coffee shop? I'm like, sure, I'll meet you at the coffee shop. I'll just go there and get a water or a smoothie or something like this, and I can smell the coffee all day long, and I have no craving to be able to drink that coffee. But at that time, when my mind still had the craving and it was still sensitive, I needed to guard the mind in this way. So you're going to be able to not only identify your cravings like I taught you here, but you're going to actually be able to identify the doorway that the contact came in through, that now you can actually be more attentive to that. Because anytime you're getting discontent, it's either from the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the body, or the mind itself. It's coming into some doorway. That's the only way your mind can interact with the outside world. And if you have a craving inside your mind, then when you have this contact through these doorways, that's what's going to arise the discontentedness. So not only can you identify the actual craving, you'll actually ultimately be able to identify the doorway that it's coming in through. And I teach you about this. There's a retreat in January. It's everything you need to get to the first stage of enlightenment. And I teach you about the 6 sense bases in there. And then also the Pali Canon and English study group, we have an entire book, volume 9, that we study the 6 sense bases. And you learn about these kinds of things in the way that you can guard your mind and guard these doorways. And this is what your mindfulness is helping you to do, where you're just always aware and vigilant of what's going on in the mind. And the Buddha talks about what's called the 5 hindrances. So he teaches you all about these things that it takes to get to enlightenment, but then he teaches you the 5 things that are going to hinder you or block you from getting to enlightenment. They're called the 5 hindrances. And the 5 hindrances, they are sensual desire, ill will, complacency, restlessness and worry, and doubt. And I teach you these at different times in the various programs. Well, complacency, I think you kind of understand, it's like dullness, lethargic, lackluster, being uninterested to do things. That's what complacency is. And you might associate that with not meditating or not coming to the temple or not reading the book. Yeah, that's complacency. That's big time complacency. But the Buddha describes complacency all the way down to the point, if you have an unwholesome thought in your mind and you do nothing about it, this is complacency. So if I'm walking down the street and I smell the coffee and it arises craving in my mind and I do nothing about it, that's complacency. So that's why I ended up in the coffee shop and I ended up ordering, because I was complacent. I was sitting there, I was thinking about it, but I didn't cut it off. I just allowed it to persist in the mind. So in that situation, I was complacent. So I needed to eliminate this complacency all the way to the point where when you're walking down the street, you're aware of what's going on in your own mind. And if you notice anything unwholesome, which craving is unwholesome, you cut it off. Or if you notice anger or frustration or irritation, or you notice conceit where you're judging other people, like, look at her hair, or look at her jewelry, or look at his muscles. Doesn't he think he's so great? No, that's your mind that's doing that, right? So cut that off and let that go. Don't be complacent and allow these unwholesome thoughts, or even at nighttime as you're dozing off to sleep, if you have these thoughts that are invading your mind, cut those off. Don't allow the mind to sit there and dwell in those, because that's the rewiring of the mind. When the mind is starting to have these unwholesome thoughts or these unwholesome qualities, you're training the mind to say, nope, I'm not going to let you do that. Because if you allow the mind to sit there and dwell in that unwholesome thought, it's just going to keep doing that over and over and over again. Or that feeling, right? So that's why you're cutting these things off and you're training the mind, nope, I'm not going to let you do this. One of the analogies that the Buddha gives on this is he talks about these animals, that he talks about this post or this pillar that's down into the earth, and that's these 6 animals. And these 6 animals are tied to this post and pillar. The alligator's pulling towards the river, the monkey's pulling towards the jungle, the bird is pulling towards the sky. And every time they pull, they get yanked back to this post or pillar, and they just keep pulling and pulling and pulling. They keep getting yanked back and yanked back and yanked back and yanked back. Eventually, these animals realize, like, I'm not going anywhere. I can't go anywhere, so I'm just going to sit right here by this post and pillar. And they calm down and they just sit there and relax. Your mind's the same way. It's going to keep pulling and pulling and pulling like these wild animals. But every time it does that, if you yank it back and you yank it back, eventually it's going to be like, all right, I'm just going to sit here, because you're not going to let me run away anymore. You're not going to let me go. So I'm just going to sit here and be calm. So in your meditation and in your daily life, your mind's going to keep pulling through these 6 sense bases. That's the 6 animals. It's going to keep pulling, and you're just keep yanking it back and yanking it back and yanking it back and yanking it back and yanking it back, constantly in meditation and constantly in daily life. And this is where the mind eventually just gives in and says, okay, I'm going to sit here. And this is why, like, the idea of meditating like 6 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours a day, if you're doing meditation the way the Buddha taught, this isn't actually possible. It'd be exhausting to sit there for 6 or 8 or 10 or 12 hours and keep yanking your mind back. But if you're sitting there like looking at your thoughts, making your grocery list, doing all these different kinds of things, yeah, you could sit there for 6, 8, 10 hours, 12 hours and meditate. But that's not what the Buddha is teaching you. He's teaching you to cut these things off. And this can be very exhausting, and especially when you first get started. This is why you can sometimes fall asleep in meditation, and you can get really tired during your meditation. You might just have to stop. And then he gives the other analogy too, that if your mind is unrestrained, it's like these 6 animals being tied to ropes, and there's a knot in the middle. And now, whichever animal is the strongest, it's going to pull the other 5 animals to it. So let's just say your eye sense base is really strong, and you're walking in the mall and you see this handsome man, or you see this beautiful woman, right? And your eye is pulling towards that person. That's the animal pulling, because it's unrestrained, because all these animals are tied in a knot. But what you'd like to do is have them tied to this post and pillar so that you can keep yanking them back. And that's where you redirect your mind. Like, say you're walking behind someone in the mall and it's like, wow, look at that shape. Man, his muscles are amazing. Or wow, look at her, whatever, and you're looking, instead of sitting there and just dwelling in that and continue to keep looking at that, you need to redirect the mind. And that's where you might like go to the bathroom, or you might dip into a store for a minute or 2 or 3, let that person keep on walking. Whereas if you just sat there and you kept looking at that person like, oh boy, that looks good. This is your mind dwelling, and your sense base is unguarded. You're not guarding your mind. You're being complacent in that situation. So you need to be really attentive to the mind. Say you're on a motorbike and there's somebody in front of you and you're pulling up behind them, and wow, they look really attractive. Rather than sit there behind them and just keep staring at it, move to the side and come up in front where it's not even in your view anymore. And this will train your mind to let go. Eventually, you'll get to the point where you don't have cravings in your mind to be attracted to these things. Your mind's not going to pull towards them because you've eliminated your cravings. But in the process of doing that, you need your mindfulness and your concentration to be so well refined that when you see these things, you take action. That's your right effort, that you take action to do something else and redirect the mind.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, I had a question. How things like violent movies or social media pollute your mind, and when you're meditating affects your meditation?
Mm-hmm.
This is because before going to bed, I usually watch a Netflix movie, and then it affects my mood. When I get up, maybe I feel bad, and I'm like, why I slept all night? What is this? Can you talk about this?
Yeah, the thing that's happening there is the mind is clinging and holding on to it. So the problem isn't the Facebook, the problem isn't the Netflix or the movie. The problem is that when the mind's digesting this content, it can't let it go. So that's where the mind's ruminating on this. So if you're noticing that watching like a horror movie on Netflix before going to bed produces bad dreams, and you wake up feeling grumpy and irritable because you didn't sleep well, then this is something that you know about this mind. Like right now, the mind isn't able to let that go. So it's unwise to watch that horror movie right before going to bed. And that's where the Buddha doesn't teach you these things. But if you see the cause and effect, then you know this, and you're like, okay, if I'd like to watch a horror movie, I need to do that like in the morning or the middle of the day, because then the mind has a more opportunity to let it go before I go to sleep, and it's no big deal. And that's what the kind of things that you would like to do. Ultimately, as you train your mind, you'll be able to do anything like those kinds of things, and you won't have any issues whatsoever. But when your mind's in the process of being trained and it can't let go, and you notice these kinds of things, you can modify your decisions in order to make better decisions and experience better results. Like I was talking about, like I noticed last night, or I've actually been noticing for a few days now, that when I eat sweets, I have more urine, and now I need to stop eating sweets at nighttime. And if I'm going to do that, eat it earlier in the day. So these are things that you learn about this body and you learn about this mind. And now you make wiser decisions through having that insight. But ultimately, you'll be able to do any of those kinds of things. Your mind won't hold on to it. You won't have difficulty sleeping.
But do you watch a violent movie, or is it something you avoid?
Me?
Like, yes, like killings, all those things. It's hard for my mind sometimes say, no, this is acting, this is not real. But when I see killings, it really affects me, and I don't know how to deal with it.
Sure. There was a period of time where I went away from all that stuff for an extended period of time, trained the mind to let that go. And then ultimately, like, I go to the movies with my son from time to time, and some of them are violent, some of them aren't, and it doesn't affect me. But I did need to distance myself for a period of time. So the problem isn't the movie, because this is just entertainment, an art form, these kinds of things. But if you're noticing that you're affected by it, then you should go away from it. This is how you eliminate attachments, is you first distance yourself from the object. Then you need to work on your mind, be it 6 months, a year, 2 years, whatever you would like to do. But then ultimately, if it is something that you would like to ultimately watch, you can bring it back in, and you'll notice that slowly but surely your mind's not affected by it anymore, because you've trained your mind to eliminate any cravings. But you need to distance yourself from it for an extended period of time to allow the mind to let go of this particular craving before you can integrate something like that back in. Something like coffee, something like alcohol, things like this, you're not going to ever bring back into your life. But things like a movie or other things like this, you're not actually causing any harm by watching that movie. So these are things that you can bring back in, but you're going to need to distance yourself from the object for a period of time, let the mind get rid of the attachment, then you can essentially reintegrate it back in if you choose. And it's up to you. You may or may not ever choose to watch those kinds of movies.
Thank you. So my question is, it really makes sense to how to distance or disattach the objects at the beginning of the practice. So my question is, how about people, especially the people close to you? It's really hard to disconnect or distance certain period of time. In that case, what's your advice?
In some cases, you can distance yourself from people. In other cases, you may not. Like if you have a life partner or something like this, what you can do is you can do it in small time frames. Like you can go on holiday by yourself, or you can go visit a friend for an extended period of time, or like children, they can go stay with grandma for a period of time, or friends and stuff like this. So you can do like 2 or 3 days away and then back together, 4 or 5 days away and back together. And this impermanence of coming back and forth will train your mind, because each time you have to let go. And each time they come and go, and each time you come and go. In some situations, you can distance yourself. Like there were times where I was away from my mom for 3 years or 5 years, and I didn't talk to her. And that's what I needed to do in order to train my mind to let go. Not in every situation it needs to be that long, but I just had so much anger and so much resentment. I needed that long period of time. And she needed it too, because she had a certain amount of resentment and hostility in her mind as well. So this actually helped us. With my sister, there was a time where I went away for like 10 years from her. So in some situations you can go away from the person, but remember what I taught yesterday about the reflection on death, contemplation of death. That one is going to really help you. And even when you're in a relationship side by side with each other, you can be actually doing that, which will help your mind get comfortable with this impermanence of the relationship.
And to me, I would love to do that, but my mom would never allow me to go away for very long time. Then physically, we were not really living in the same country. However, she have all those phones and text messages, and I have to get immediately respond to her. Otherwise, she would go crazy. She would call my ex, call my kid, in order to find out I'm fine. That's making me really uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm. So your mom's not the one who decides whether you go away or not. It's your decision, but your attachment to wanting mom to be a certain way and not be frazzled, you're replying back to her messages right away. So because your mind is uncomfortable with not replying to mom's messages, and mom is not comfortable when you don't reply to her messages, this is something that I would suggest you do, is slowly start creating more and more space. How long is it taking for you before you reply?
Oh, I'm okay. But okay. I said, she will text my kids. Uh-huh. She will text my ex. She will find all the friends she has contact and just let her do that.
So be it. Yeah. If she's going to do that, then she does it, because that's her karma. That's her decisions. And as she does this, eventually her mind's going to have to let go. So if you continue to reply to her, meeting her expectation of what she wants, she'll never let go. One of the most loving and kind things you can do is create an environment where this person needs to let go of their attachment. So if I know that somebody is attached to something, I will do that thing in order to help them to let it go. So I'll give you this example. One time, me and my son, we were sitting at a table in our house. And I don't know if I told this in this class. My wife, at that time, she was washing all the dishes. We hardly ever wash dishes. Now we wash dishes ourselves, but at that time, she was washing a lot of the dishes. So we would drink water. We would leave our cup on the table, because if we got a new cup every single time we got water, it means she would be washing 10, 15 cups a day from me and then from him. So we would just leave our cup there for 3, 4, 5, 10 days before we would wash it, or she would wash it. Well, one day she came downstairs and she saw the cups on the table. We were sitting there and she was like, "Why do you guys keep doing this? Oh, you got your cups everywhere." You know, and she was really upset. And then we just stayed quiet and she walked away. And then I looked at my son and I said, "You know what we need to do, right?" And he's like, "Yep, I sure do." So we went and we got every single cup we could find in the house, and we put them everywhere all over the house, on the table, on the floor. Like some of them were on the end tables and stuff, but some of them we just put on the floor around the living room. So she came back down about an hour or two later, and she walked downstairs and she looked and she looked and she looked, and you could see her eyes. And then she just walked away. She didn't say anything. And in that moment, she let go of her attachment and she stopped. We never heard her complain about that ever again. The worst thing you can do is feed someone's attachment. So if my wife came down and she was upset, and we just were like, "Oh, okay, sorry, Mom, we'll put our cups away. Oh, I'm so sorry." You know, you're just like bending to their aggression and their hostility, and now you're being feared into doing something that person's way. And then it's not going to be just that thing. It's going to be the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. So what we were helping her to be able to do is let go of her attachment. We didn't cause any harm to her. We didn't cause her physical harm. We didn't cause material harm to her personal possessions. We didn't cause harm to her reputation. We just did something that allowed her mind to let go of this attachment. And now her mind's more liberated, that now when dishes are around or what have you, she doesn't get upset. She just sees them and she's no big deal. She's understands this impermanence now. So one of the best things you can do for your mom is create an environment where she has the opportunity to let go of this attachment. And yeah, her mind's going to be painful and she's going to experience that, but you're not producing that pain. It's her own mind doing that. So if you can get to the point where you're not attached to mom always being peaceful, and understand that she's going to have to walk through the fire in order to appreciate the fresh air on the other side. You've heard me say that in this class, that she's going to have to walk through these painful feelings in order to get to the peace and joy on the other side. Because she gets so much pleasure when you do reply to her and she has that craving, as she's letting that craving go and her mind's not getting what it wants, it's going to experience these painful feelings. But now, after walking through that fire, on the other side of that, when she finally lets it go, she's going to be so much more peaceful. And you'll experience more peace too, because you're letting go of your attachment to your mom. So continuing to write to her, you know, when she expects, isn't actually solving the problem. It's just keeping her stuck and locked in this craving, and it's going to allow it to continue to persist.
Should I tell her? I said, "Mom, at this point, I'm going to post a poem to respond to your text because I'm safe when I'm traveling alone." Do I need to tell her, prep her about the change? Because I'm okay. Honestly, I have great life by myself, but she will be like in painful and will start to send her resentment to my father.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So what you can do is, like, you know, let's just say that she expects you to reply to her within 30 minutes. And if you don't, she's off messaging all kinds of people. Let's just say that you end up talking to her 2 hours later or 3 hours later, which eventually you'd like that to be like a day later, 2 days later, 3 days later, but you got to slowly build up to this. Having loving kindness and compassion for your mom, realizing that she's craving permanence and you need to do these little incremental changes. You're not interested in going to 3 days right away. You're interested in doing this slowly, but eventually that's what you'd like to be able to get to, that kind of thing. But let's just say you talk to her after an hour or 2 or 3 and she's like, "Oh my God, where have you been? Like, I've been calling everybody. I have no idea where you're at." Mom, it's okay. I'm not always going to be able to reply to you whenever you want me to reply. I suggest you just let go. Let me go. I am, I don't know, 30 years old, 35 years old. I don't know.
Thank you. You're very kind.
I don't know, whatever age you are, Mom, I am this age. I'm okay. You've done well. I can take care of myself. Yeah, but I had to talk to you and a little. It's okay, Mom. How's your day going? Just completely redirect her mind. How's your day going? Because rather than just sit there and talk, she's not going to let go of it. Even if you go to her and you say, Mom, this is what I'm going to start doing. And just to let you know, this is what I'm going to start doing. It's not going to help her. So in the moment where she's discontent, you say, it's okay, Mom. I'm just fine. You've raised me well. I can take care of myself. I'm a 40, 45. I don't know how old you are.
Hey, why add 10 years?
I'm increasing it now because I saw you smiling. Right?
Let's go back to 30. That's fine.
30?
I take it.
Okay. I don't know how old you are, but anyway, you've raised an individual that can make their own decisions, and then you just change the subject and switch it to something else. And she might even say, well, you got to start doing this and you got to start doing that. Mom, how's Dad doing? What are you guys up to? Just don't even address it. Just switch the subject and just keep walking down this path of switching the subject, because that's helping her mind to let it go. And each time you do this, you'll see that her discontentedness will become less and less and less and less. And you'll see that this is the most loving and kind thing you can do for your mom. And eventually she's going to let go of it, because you're going to see that you can go 5 hours, 6 hours, 1 day, 2 days, and she's not upset. And you're like, wow, Mom's letting go of her attachment. And this is wonderful for her.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to share something that is related. Share something that happened to me last night. It's related to that. But now my role of a father. I was walking back to my hotel after enjoying a nice beer, nice music, right, very close here. And then it was like on my way back to the hotel, I thought, oh, I'm going to call Alejandro, our son, who is, by the way, enjoying his last summer before going to college. He's 18 already, enjoying his last summer before going to college, living the life in Spain before going back to the US, and he's fine. But I was like, I'm going to call him. And then I thought, oh, wait a second. What is actually the purpose of this call? Mm-hmm. He's fine. It's just my own peace of mind that want to know that everything is under control and that he's fine. When he needs us, he calls us. He only calls us when he really needs us. Something that he needs us. Mm-hmm. Yeah? He has a good sense of when to call us and when not to call us. And then I thought, you know what? I'm not going to call him. I just continue walking. I did not call.
Perfect.
You know what? I slept through. I was fine. I didn't even check if he texted in the morning. He'll call us when he needs us, like he did yesterday when he needed us. And So that was liberating. That was good. That was good.
You felt more peace, right?
Yes. So thank you.
That's where you can confirm the teachings that I share with you. That yesterday I taught you to communicate with a purpose, to call with a purpose.
Exactly.
Right?
That was key.
And that's where you can say, "Wow, this is the truth. I can see this is working." Right. And you can see the Four Noble Truths is the truth, because when you let go, the mind becomes peaceful.
Because that's what I noticed. Like whatever he's doing, what he's up to right now, is anecdotal to the real purpose of this attempt to call. It's just, I want to know. It's my own craving. And I have a strong craving for my son that I'm working on it. So it was good.
Good. Okay. Anything else you guys would like to talk about on this topic? No? Okay, so it's 10:30. Let's take a mid-morning break, even though I haven't talked about this topic yet. For those of you guys online, when we come back from break, I'm going to be talking about this topic of sharing the path to enlightenment, how to guide children along the path. And this is going to help you not only with children, but other people in your life as well. So it's basically about 10:30. So let's come back at 10:45, and then I'll share this topic with you guys. Okay, so great discussion, and enjoy your break. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started with our topic this morning, which is sharing the path to enlightenment, how to guide children along the path. This is a topic that's helpful if you're going to have children or if you currently have children. This can help you to guide people along the path. It can also help you as you have nieces or nephews, or you have life partners, or you have coworkers who are interested in getting your help. This topic will be able to help you in this situation, because it's really helpful for you to be able to learn and practice and get the wisdom that you need to be able to get to enlightenment. But one of the rewarding things is sharing it with other people. That if you cultivate cultivate this wisdom and you see the teachings are improving the condition of your mind, and you're going to be able to see that more and more readily, one of the rewarding things is to be able to help other people on the path if they're interested in it. But that's where you need to be sure that people are interested. And children are individuals that, if you have children, our role as parents is to guide them and help them cultivate wisdom. In situations like a coworker or a friend or family member, we're not responsible for that, and we shouldn't just push ourselves in and give unsolicited guidance. This would be our own ego if we decided to do that. So I'm going to give you guidance on how to help a child, but then at certain points I'm going to help you understand how to help other people. But whenever you're helping anybody on the path to enlightenment, you're not interested in forcing it upon them, because this would be your own ego, this would be unsolicited guidance, this would be your own craving, and it's going to produce unwholesome results. Because whenever you make decisions through craving, desire, attachment, it's going to produce unwholesome results. So let's first just kind of set up the scenario of what you're looking at when you're potentially interested in sharing teachings with a child, right? If you think about the child as a plant, the child is the plant, right? The parent or the person who's teaching is the plant enthusiast that's interested in growing the plant. And then the teachings of the Buddha are like the guide stake. That's what's going to guide this plant. And it's going to guide you in being able to share the wisdom that's going to help this plant grow. So if you think about your children, or you think about employees or the people around you like a plant, and everybody's growing, and you're a plant enthusiast interested in seeing lots of people grow and evolve and become better and better human beings, then you're using the teachings of the Buddha as your guide, and that's what's guiding you. Okay? And now I'll share with you all the things that you can consider in terms of guidance. And just like the last topic that we talked about yesterday, the number one thing is you need to acquire wisdom. You're not going to be able to guide anybody on the path to enlightenment if you don't have the wisdom. And since I don't ever know who's going to be in one talk or another, I make sure that I repeat this in each individual talk, that you need to cultivate your wisdom through learning, through reflecting, and through practicing deeply, cultivating the wisdom in your own mind. That's what's going to prepare you to be able to share the teachings. So if you've just learned the teachings in the last week or two and you started the learning, this isn't the time for you to go out and start teaching people, right? So you're going to need to cultivate multiple months and maybe even years of the wisdom of the teachings before you even consider sharing them with other people. Okay? Remember that your child is their own being, that they aren't your child, right? Your child. Oftentimes that's the way we think about it. This is my son or my daughter. You need to understand that they are their own individual being, that they're not yours, that while we might say this is my son or my daughter or my child, they're not truly mine. They don't belong to me. I'm not permanent in their life. So the thing that you're interested in doing is helping them cultivate wisdom. You're not interested in dictating to them what they should or shouldn't do, because the more you tell them what they should or shouldn't do, the more they're going to do just the opposite. Instead, what you're trying to do is grow them and nurture them and help them cultivate wisdom. And there's ways to be able to help them to do that and guide them to the wisdom. They're going to need to cultivate this wisdom themselves, because if the only reason why they're making a certain wise decision is because you're fearing them into doing it, or you're putting pressure on them, then they're only going to make that wise decision as long as that pressure is there and as long as that fear is there. And that pressure and that fear is not permanent. It's only when you're around. So as soon as your back is turned, they're going to make other decisions that are opposite of what would be wise. So you're not interested in fearing or pressuring children into doing any one particular thing, but instead you're interested in guiding them to cultivate wisdom. Because when they have wisdom about the natural laws, whether you're there or whether you're gone, they're going to still make those same decisions, because they have the wisdom of seeing, well, oh wow, this is wise. If I do it this way, this is much better. So when you're fearing or guilting or shaming or trying to force or coerce or put your expectations on people, this is only going to work as long as you're around. And since you're impermanent in their life, it's not going to be a decision that they're going to make consistently. So in order for a person to make consistently wise decisions, they need to cultivate the wisdom. And that's why you would like to see yourself as like this parallel process. Like your child is in life and they're going forward, or your life partner or your employees or whoever, they're going forward in their life, and you're just this parallel process helping them and guiding them to cultivate their own wisdom. And then they'll make those wise decisions whether you're there or whether you're not. Okay? With children, it's best to start early. even when they're in the womb, right? Because a child, they have very little pollution in their mind. They can actually eliminate their pollution and experience an improved and better way of life a lot easier than when we get older. When we're 30, 40, 50, 60 and older, we've taken on more and more pollution. It doesn't mean that somebody who's 70 years old, their mind is absolutely polluted, because remember, these are the natural laws of existence and people can learn them at different times of their life. You can learn from grandma and grandpa and things like this, like a little bit of the teachings here or there, because the Buddha gives you the complete package of the natural laws of existence of exactly what it'll take to get to enlightenment. But people with different mentors and teachers and parents and guides, they can learn little pieces of it here and there. But it does get a bit harder as we age, because our mind isn't necessarily as crisp and sharp, and we've accumulated a lot more conditioning. There's never a bad time to start learning the teachings of the Buddha, but it's easier when someone starts early. So if you can start with the child early, even when they're in the womb, this is actually really helpful. When the child's in the womb, oftentimes we think that they're isolated and they can't hear what's going on, but they can actually hear what's going on. They can hear their mother's voice. They can get their tone and their temperament. They can even hear outside things. When my son was inside his mom's womb, I would play him mandolin, and you could see him moving around inside the stomach, and I would play the mandolin to him. And then when he came out and he was actually an infant, there were times where he would have difficulty sleeping, and I would just start playing the mandolin, and right away it would remind him of being in the womb, and he would actually fall asleep. And there was even times when he got a little bit older and he started walking around that my mandolin would be in the corner, and he would actually go and get it, and he would bring it to me, and he would like hand it to me. He couldn't talk. He would just grab it and he would like push it to me, and he'd be like, here, play this, right? So they understand and they can hear things. So when the child is in the womb, it's important not to argue, not to be bitter and hostile and harsh, because they're hearing all that stuff. And if they're hearing all this argumentative hostility and bitterness when they're in the womb, they're going to absorb all of those things. So if mom can be meditating, and then dad can also be meditating and training their mind and ensuring that you're not arguing and you're not bitter and you're not hostile when the baby's in the womb, this will allow the baby to ensure that they're in an environment that isn't hostile and bitter and harsh. It's helpful when you're starting early to introduce impermanence into their life. There are certain things that you can be doing to introduce impermanence into their life. Sometimes we're taught to have all these set routines and we want our child to do things a certain way, but you would like to introduce impermanence into their life. And I'll give you some examples of what I've done with my own son. At one time, I knew my son was most likely attached to Legos because he was playing a lot of Legos and he would make these little things, and then he would go off to school and then he would come home and he'd play with them some more. So there was a time where I kind of figured he was attached to these Legos, and I taught him about the Four Noble Truths. I had taught him about impermanence and training his mind to a certain degree. So when one time he went off to school, he left his Legos on the living room floor, and I just kind of broke them up a little bit into like 3 or 4 pieces. And then he came home from school and he saw that they were laying on the floor broken, and right away he starts crying. I'm not causing his discontentedness. It's his craving, desire, attachment. I'm creating an environment in which he has the opportunity to let go of this craving, desire, attachment. So when he started crying and he was upset when he saw his Legos, I got down on the floor with him and I started talking to him. And I was like, what's going on here? Yeah, my Legos are broken. And I'm like, well, what's happening? Why is your mind upset? Because of my Legos, my Legos. I was like, no, it's not your Legos. Remember we were talking last week? What is it that's causing your mind to be discontent? And then we just started talking about craving and impermanence, and I was able to help him see that his mind was craving permanence and he was wanting his Legos to be permanent. So eventually he cut that off and let it go, and now he puts his Legos back together, right? Because I explained to him, I said, look, they're apart. You know, they were together, and that is impermanent. But them being apart is impermanent too. You can put them back together, right? This is all just impermanence. So eventually he put them back together and he felt better, right? So then I waited about 4 or 5 days, and then I did it again. I broke up his Legos, and he comes home. He's like, oh, out my Legos, right? And then this time the discontentness was a lot less. You could see it becoming less. And this is why it's so important to eliminate your attachment to your children, because if you're attached to your children, that's why I taught that topic yesterday about how to eliminate attachment to those closest to you, because as long as your mind's attached, you'll have painful feelings when your child is having painful feelings. But when you get rid of your attachment, you won't have painful feelings. And I knew that this was the best thing I could do for him. So the second time he cried a lot less. It was maybe like 30 seconds or a minute. So then he put it back together. So then I waited like 3, 4, 5 days, and then I did it again. And I broke open his toys and I broke it into more pieces. And this time he comes home, he looks at the Legos, he looks at me, he looks at the Legos, he looks at me. He's like, you broke up my Legos, didn't you? I was like, yep, sure did. He's like, all right, I'm just going to put them back together. No crying, no nothing. He just put them back together, right? So this is how you can help a child, by introducing impermanence. The last thing I would be interested in doing is like, oh, Bailan, you just made this Lego thing. Put it on the shelf so that it doesn't get broken and nobody disturbs it, so that it'll be exactly the way it was when you came home. This is just reinforcing the craving for permanence. Instead, you would like to introduce some impermanence into their life and make sure that they're getting comfortable with impermanence more and more. So there's things like, maybe he has like a brownie in the refrigerator and he's really wanting to eat this brownie when he comes home. I might take a bite out of it while he's at school and put it back in the refrigerator, right? So when he comes home, he's got some impermanence to deal with. And I'm not doing this to be mean or vindictive. Hey, if he's got craving, he's causing his own discontentedness, but he's learning to be able to understand this impermanence and that things around him are impermanent. So now he can train his mind. So this is the kind of things that you're going to need to do. And that's why it's important for you to eliminate your attachment to people that are close to you, so you feel comfortable doing these kinds of things and realize that this is the best thing that you can actually be doing for your family, is helping them to eliminate their craving, desire, attachment. But you're not interested in doing this to somebody constantly, repetitively, over and over and over again, particularly people who haven't learned the teachings. With my son, I was formally teaching him the teachings from the age of 6. And even before that, his mom was meditating when he was in the womb. And even when he was an infant, we were doing things when he was an infant. When he was playing with his toys at 1 or 2 years old, and he would break something, there's that period of time where you see their face getting ready to become discontent. They haven't started crying yet. They're just getting ready to. And we would redirect his mind. We'd be like, did you see that cloud outside? That looks like a really beautiful cloud. Go take a look at that cloud. Let's go over there. And sometimes I would take his hand and I'd walk him over. Or I'm like, did you hear that? Was that a bird outside? You're not lying because you're hearing a bird or you're seeing a squirrel outside, or there's typically clouds outside. You can be like, hey, let's go look at the clouds. I would like to see the clouds. So where you're sitting there playing with them and you're seeing them getting ready to get discontent, they don't understand the 4 foundations of mindfulness and to cut off and let go at the bodily sensations. But if you do, you can do things for your children where you see them getting ready to get discontent and you can redirect their mind. So we did this all with him all the way through his infancy and his toddler, so that by the time he was 6 years old and I started formally training him, it was really easy for him to be able to train his mind, because we'd done all this preliminary work with him when he was in the womb, when he was in infancy and toddler. So by 6 years old, he was able to train his mind pretty readily, and now he's a pretty chilled guy. He very rarely ever gets discontent, and when it does, it's very minimal and very insignificant when it happens. So he's not enlightened yet, but he has quite a bit of peace and joy in his life, that his mind's just always peaceful. So there's things that you can be doing where you introduce impermanence in their life, and you can help them with the teachings because you know the teachings. So instead of reinforcing permanence and trying to help their mind to get craving, desire, attachment, do just the opposite, is put their mind in the situation that it doesn't want to be in. If they have a certain place where they put their shoes every single day and they put their shoes in that place, every once in a while move their shoes somewhere else so they can't find it. Sometimes he plays his computer at nighttime and he's playing with his computer and he's thinking that when I wake up in the morning, I'm going to come down and play my computer. In the nighttime when he's sleeping, I might take his computer and I might put it away somewhere where he can't find it. So when he comes down in the morning, the computer's not there. And if he was craving for it to be there, now he's got this impermanence. So these are the kinds of things that you can easily do. And you would like to space this out and do it in a way that it allows their mind to adjust to the impermanence that you're creating. But remember, they're going to have to walk through the fire to appreciate the fresh air on the other side. They're going to have to walk through the fire. So in those situations where he was discontent, he might have gotten angry with me a few times, more than a few times. But after he got over it and his mind got more liberated, he really appreciates it. So he didn't like the methods that Dad was using, but he appreciates the results of what he's experiencing now. Okay, so start early with your children because their mind is less polluted at that time, and it'll be a lot easier for them to be able to train their mind. Create a culture in your family of acquiring wisdom, and that this is something that you would like to kind of cultivate within your family. For example, like say your children ask you a question, Dad, why are the clouds white? I don't know. Why don't we find out? Let's start looking around. We start looking on the internet, or we look in a book or something like this. So you can cultivate this culture of wisdom where they're interested in cultivating wisdom. When they start asking you questions, if you don't know, just say, I don't know. And if you have ego in your mind, you might not be willing to say, I don't know. But saying, I don't know is really good for your ego. And it's also really good for your children because then they'll get comfortable with saying, I don't know. But then don't just leave it there. Let's say, you know what? I don't know. Let's find out. Let's figure out why the clouds are white, or let's figure out why the sky is blue. You can figure these things out and create a culture of cultivating wisdom. And if you don't know the wisdom, help them to find the resources that can find that wisdom, whether it's looking on the internet or looking in a book or an encyclopedia, or maybe asking somebody that knows the answer to that question. Sometimes he asks me questions and I'm like, you know what? I don't know the answer to that, but I think your mom does because she's really into that kind of thing. Why don't you ask your mom when you get home, right? And if he forgets to ask her when we get home, I might remind him like, hey, weren't you interested in learning that thing from your mom? Maybe you should go ask her, right? So you can cultivate this culture of constantly acquiring wisdom, because that's what's going to lead to improved results in one's life, is cultivating wisdom. Remember that you're a role model in your children's life, but not only your children. If you have employees, if you have coworkers, if you have neighbors, if you have other family members, people are going to look to you as a role model. They're going to mimic whatever conduct you're doing, right? So however you choose to conduct yourself in the world, people are going to tend to conduct themselves in that same way. So every decision you make through your own moral conduct and through your own mental discipline or lack thereof, your children and coworkers and neighbors, they're watching that kind of stuff and they're learning from those kinds of things. So what you would like to do is set a wise example for the people around you. And you don't have to tell them that you're being a role model for them, but people are just going to observe you and they're going to watch you. Particularly as you become more and more peaceful, they're going to be like, hey, she's so peaceful. Let me do what she's doing. So the more that you conduct yourself with wholesome moral conduct and with mental discipline, people around you will tend to function that way. So that example I gave you the other day where I was talking about my son falling down at the rollerblading thing, and I was very calm in that situation, the adults that were there with me, they were observing me and they were like, wow, like I would like to be more like that. And they're like interested in cultivating those same qualities. So people are going to be watching you and observing you, and be sure you understand that you're going to be teaching your child every single moment, whether you're speaking to them or not. You're not just teaching through your spoken words, you're teaching through your actions as well. So when grandma goes to the hospital, if you get all frazzled and your mind's all discontent, your children are learning that from you, or your life partner, or your neighbors, or other people around you. But by you maintaining calmness and composure, and by you using things like right speech and right action, people are learning that from you. And then you'll see more and more people will be making wholesome decisions around you. In terms of your children and the people around you, being respectful towards your life partner, your parents, your grandparents, your siblings, elders, people in the community, even exes, this is really important. There was a period of time where me and my wife separated. I think it was 2 different times, and we were spending time with our son individually. I never badmouthed my wife in front of my son. So when we ultimately got back together and decided to keep our relationship going, there was nothing I had to go to my son and say, by the way, all that stuff I told you about your mom, it's not true. I never had to do that because I knew that even if me and my wife never were together again, that he needed to have a good relationship with his mom. And I wasn't interested in gossiping or slandering about her and degrading her. So when you're having exes or you're having life partners or you're interacting with your parents, you're teaching your children how to interact with you. So if you are interacting with your parents in a negative and hostile and bitter way, and you're constantly complaining about your parents, you're teaching your children how to interact with you. So when they have children, they're going to be complaining about you to their children. This is your karma coming back to you. This is how it comes back to you. So not only are you a role model, but you would like to show this respect to all the people around you. Because if you're really respectful to your employees will be respectful to you. If you're really respectful to your neighbors, they'll be really respectful to you. Like I start talking many years ago with my students, I would say, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, and things like this. And next thing I know, within a couple of weeks or a couple of months, students were doing that same thing with me. I didn't practice that because that's what I wanted for my students. I just did it because it was the polite, kind, friendly, and respectful way to interact with people. And whatever you put out, that's what's going to come back to you. So even with my son, I will refer to him as yes, sir, occasionally. And because of that, he actually says it to me sometimes too, right? So whatever you put out, it's going to come back to you. So if you treat the people around you with respect, you'll see that your children will treat you with respect because they're learning from you. Get comfortable with the struggle and allowing it to occur. Your kids are going to struggle, right? They're not preloaded with wisdom, just like you. You've struggled in life, and that's helped you to cultivate certain wisdom. So as they're struggling, you're going to need to allow that struggle to occur. And I gave you some examples on that yesterday with my son where he struggled, and even with that Lego example that I just gave, he struggled through that, and he was challenged with that. But that was really helpful for his mind, and he was able to overcome that. And now when his Legos are broken up, no big deal, right? It's not a big deal. So they're going to need to struggle, and you don't need to feel guilty when you see them struggling because you're not causing their struggling. When they're struggling, if you rush in and make a bunch of decisions because you're not comfortable with their struggle and you're making a bunch of decisions for them, you're ensuring that their struggle is going to continue because they didn't get to cultivate the wisdom to overcome that struggle. You rushed in and solved all the problems for them, and they didn't cultivate the wisdom to be able to solve that on their own. So now, because you're impermanent in their life and you're not with them, when they face that same situation, they're not going to have the wisdom of how to solve it. So the last thing you're interested in doing is rushing in and solving a bunch of problems for your children. What you would like to do is be there alongside of them and let them know you're here to guide them and you're here to help them. But then as they're making decisions, help them with those decisions and guide them in wise decision making, not forcing them, not controlling them, but helping them to cultivate the wisdom to make those wise decisions and realize that they're going to have missteps. They're going to have struggles, and that's okay, because when your mind is struggling the most, that's when you're cultivating the most wisdom. You have the best opportunity to cultivate wisdom when you're struggling the most. Think about the challenges that you've had in life. Those have been the time frames when you've cultivated the most wisdom. So if you take that struggle away from your children, they're not going to be able to cultivate the wisdom. So in some situations, you would like to allow that struggle to happen in a lot of situations, but just be there to provide them guidance as they need it. And then through that struggle, they will cultivate the wisdom so that whether you're there or you're not there, they'll be able to make those wise decisions. Help your children eliminate attachment to you, or, we can even relate this to coworkers or neighbors or other family members and things like this, because people are going to get attached to you. As you get more and more enlightened, you're going to attract a lot of people to you. You're going to see that people are going to be interested in spending time with you because you're not causing harm to others, and they feel more and more comfortable to be around you, and they're interested in being around you because you have wisdom that they don't have, and they appreciate being around you and asking you questions to help them in their life and get that wisdom. So people are going to tend to get attached to you. But the more you get familiar with identifying your own attachments, you'll get better and better at seeing other people's attachments too. And where you see people are attached to you, you would like to create an environment where they don't have the opportunity to get attached to you. So with children, we can do things like seeing if they would like to go to a friend's house for a sleepover, or grandma and grandpa's house for like a week or two, or things like this. And we can be doing this really early in life. When I went to holiday last week with my son at Pi, there was a period of time where we were at the playground playing basketball, and he was playing with a couple of friends that he made while he was there in that city. And I said to him, hey, I would like to go back to the hotel room. Are you okay with that? And he's like, yeah, I'll see you when I get there. So I just walked away. Here, his mom's in America. We're in this city that he's never been to, and he's with these people he's never been around before, and his dad's now leaving to go to the hotel room. And he's completely comfortable being in the middle of the playground and just staying there and walking to the hotel by himself because the hotel was just right down the street. So you can do these kinds of things so that they get comfortable not being attached to you, and they can see that they can easily make decisions on their own, and they don't have to be with you every single moment. So of course, I wouldn't have done that the very first thing. There was lots of things we did to build up to that where he was able to stay at that playground by himself. But you can do these kinds of things slowly but surely, making sure that they don't cling to you and that they're comfortable with spending time with others. You're going to need to have patience as you're guiding your children or your employees or anybody else that's interested in receiving guidance from you, or you're in a role to guide that person. Because just like you need gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress, your children and the people around you are going to need that too. There's certain students, adult students of mine, that have asked questions over 14 times, the exact same question. There's this one student that kept asking this question over and over and over again. I started counting, and I lost track at 14. They asked the same exact question 14 times over a period of multiple years. And I just had to keep answering it because obviously they didn't understand and they hadn't internalized what it was that I had said. So I kept answering the question. Now, I answered it pretty much exactly the same way every time with a little bit of variation here or there. And eventually they absorbed what they needed to absorb and they don't ask that question anymore. So you're going to see that just like your mind needs gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress, your children are going to need the same thing. But what you might have is you might have a craving or an expectation that you'll teach your child once and they're supposed to get it. And now when they don't get it, you get frustrated because now you have to say it again and again and again. I can't even tell you how many times we've talked about lying, right? He's 11 years old. He's made some silly lies here and there, and he just keeps doing it over and over and over again. I mean, more than 100 times we've had discussions about lying, right? So you're going to need to be patient and understand that just like your mind needs this gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress, children need the same thing. Be creative and have fun with your children. When I started teaching my son the universal truth of impermanence, I taught it to him in about 3 or 4 minutes in the house. And then I said, hey, you know what we should do? Let's go outside on a scavenger hunt. Let's walk around the village and see if we can find things that are permanent. He's like, all right, Dad, let's go. So like we went outside and, he's 6 years old and we're walking around the village and looking for things that are permanent. And he couldn't find anything that's permanent. So then I switched it and I said, let's look for things that are impermanent. So he started looking around and he's like, oh, look at that crack in the sidewalk. That's impermanence. And I'm like, yep, sure is. And he's like, oh, look at the tree. There's green leaves in the tree and there's brown leaves on the ground. That's impermanence. Look at that fence. The paint is fading. That's impermanence. So we had fun. And then we've done this with other things too that he needed to learn, whether it was about concentration or mindfulness. There's little games that you can play with children to help them cultivate concentration and mindfulness. There's games like this. So you can be creative and have fun as you're teaching your children these different things. It's important not to force your children. If you try to force them to meditate or you try to force them to learn the teachings, it's not going to work. So I would typically say to my son, like, hey, would you like to learn something new about the teachings of the Buddha? And if he says yes, then I'll share it with him. If he says no, then it's not the right time to talk. So if you try to force your children to meditate or learn any of these teachings, they're just going to dig their heels in. So it's important that you ask them and invite them. And then when they're interested, then you share with them. It's helpful to start small and then build from there. When my son was 6 years old and I realized I needed to teach him these teachings and it was time for him to start learning, I realized that at 6 years old, I hadn't really actively, formally taught him anything. And I knew that he was going to need to follow me and he was going to need to be able to learn from me. So I decided to do something really small and then build on it. I was sitting on the sofa and he was sitting on the floor next to me and I was watching TV and I realized like, wow, I'm going to have to teach this kid this entire path to enlightenment. And I'm not even sure if he's willing to learn from me or if he's willing to do something in order to follow what it is that I need to teach him. So I saw that the remote control to the TV was next to him. And I said, Bailan, can you hand me the remote control? Because I'd never even done that up to that point at 6 years old because I was doing everything. And he said, sure, Dad, here you go. And he hands me the remote control. I was like, okay, he did that. So then I waited a few minutes and he went into the kitchen and I said, "Can you get Dad a glass of water?" And he said, "Sure, I can get you a glass of water." Because up to that point, I hadn't even ever asked him anything like that. And he got me a glass of water and he brought me a glass of water. And I was like, "Oh, thank you so much." So I started like that. That's how I actually started teaching him the teachings. I was just seeing, will he respect his dad? Will he do things that his dad asked and things like this? And I started small. And then slowly we built from there. So you're going to need to start small and build from there. Okay? Get comfortable with mistakes. As you're doing these different things, as you're implementing the training, as you're being creative and having fun, you're going to make mistakes, and so are they. There were certain times where I created this thing that I thought was going to be really fun and really creative, and I thought about it at nighttime while he was sleeping, and when he woke up in the morning, I thought this would be a really fun game to play. But as we started playing it, I was like, nah, this isn't working, and I had to let it go, right? I had to toss it to the side. So you're going to make mistakes, and you're going to realize that certain things that you're doing aren't actually working, and you're going to need to change and go to a different direction. You're going to make mistakes, and so are they. Then there's proactive training versus real-time training. What I mean by proactive training is there's things like helping them understand the foundational teachings of the 3 universal truths, the 4 noble truths, the Eightfold Path, the 5 precepts, and meditation. These are the things that are really good for children. There's other teachings they're going to need to be able to get to enlightenment, but these are like the fundamental teachings for a child. The 3 universal truths, the 4 noble truths, the Eightfold Path, the 5 precepts, and the meditation training. That's like the place to start with children, particularly young children, right? That's the proactive training. That's where it's like, hey, Bailan, let me teach you about impermanence. Let's go on the scavenger hunt. These are like proactive things that I was teaching him. But then there's what I call real-time training, like in the moment when they're having certain daily struggles, like when he was sitting on the floor crying with the Legos. This is like real-time training where I'm sitting down on the ground with him, talking about things that I taught him during the proactive training. Now I'm sitting down on the floor, reminding him about impermanence, reminding him about the 4 noble truths, but that I already taught him proactively. So now there's this real-time training. Or like maybe we're in the car, we're traveling somewhere, and he's starting to complain about something with his mom that his mom did. This is real-time training. This is an opportunity for me to now talk to him about right speech. Like, are you using right speech here? Are you talking about your mom in wise ways? Or are you gossiping and slandering about her? Which one do you think you're doing? This is like real-time training. So there's proactive training where you're helping them to understand the teachings, but then in the moment, you're going to need to teach them some things as well. So let me pause right here. There's some more that I have to teach you, but let me just pause and see if you guys have any questions on anything I've been sharing so far. You have some questions? Remember, for those of you guys online, you can ask questions through Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, putting that in the comment section. Or in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any questions that you like.
I remember the situation when you put cups in your house everywhere for your wife. And how make you sure that you don't feel like this as a provocation? Mm-hmm. Know what I mean?
Yeah. So any kind of feelings that an individual has, they're producing that in their own mind. You need to look at your actions. Have I harmed others? Have I harmed myself? Or have I harmed both? And remember, harm is harming someone physically, harming their material possessions, or harming their reputation. You can harm others, but you can't cause them discontentedness. So by putting cups around the house, have I caused her physical harm? Have I caused harm to her material possessions, or have I caused harm to her reputation? No. So that's where when you understand the natural law of karma, you realize that I haven't caused any harm to anybody here. And there's no harm that's going to come back to me. So when I did that, there was no harm that came to me because of that. And I can see it. It actually produced wholesome results, which is she eliminated a craving, and now this is better for her and better for me. So whether she perceived it as a provocation or whatever, I knew that she knew the teachings well enough that by that point she was already starting to let go of a lot of things. And I just needed to create an environment where she could let go of more things. And I've done these kinds of things readily with her and my son, countless things like this. Because if you're living with the Buddhist teacher, you're going to get to enlightenment, right? It's only a matter of time. If somebody knows how to get to enlightenment and you're living with that person, you're going to get to enlightenment. And this is why the Buddhist students would oftentimes live with him. They would live right alongside of him because he would do these kinds of things to be able to help his students to be able to get to enlightenment.
Yeah, but for example, in my situation, I'm not enlightened. I'm not a Buddhist teacher, but of course, I want to have serious relationship with someone, and I think some of the situation can come like to myself with the person, and if I do the same like you, in my head, I think I getting trouble with this person. You know what I mean? Because she maybe doesn't know like the teachings, and yeah.
That's why the topic this afternoon is how to select wholesome friends and a life partner, because one of the things you're going to hear me talk about is that in terms of selecting a life partner, I recommend you select someone who's interested in the path, or at the very least interested in doing inner work and realizing that they're a work in progress and that you aren't causing their discontentedness. If you have a partner who doesn't understand the Four Noble Truths, you guys will have difficulties all throughout your relationship, because they're going to be constantly blaming you for their feelings, and you know that you didn't cause these feelings. So one of the almost prerequisites of having a partner is it would be really wise for them to know the Four Noble Truths and be willing to do inner work and realize that they're not a perfect being and they're a work in progress. Because if you have somebody that doesn't know these things, you guys will struggle all the way through. Yep, you have a question, Leo? Okay.
Yeah, but with my family, for example, or our families, they are not on the path, maybe not interested now, how we do it, because it's about relationships, right? And we don't choose to not be with them. So
yes. So let's use the example from your life, which is a common one, where somebody's attached to you, wanting you to message them in a certain period of time. Mom's messaging you. She's really wanting to talk to you badly, and she's blowing up your phone, and you can see she's attached. By you choosing just to distance the amount of time that you reply to her or you message her, you're not causing her any harm. She's getting angry perhaps, but you're not causing that. And you can slowly help her to realize this. By you choosing not to reply to her and expanding the amount of time that you reply to her, this is the most loving and kind thing you can do for her. And you feeding her craving, or feeding the monster, so to speak, isn't actually helping her. And yeah, she's going to get angry. She's going to get upset. And if you're not attached to her and you realize very clearly that you're not causing her discontentedness, you will have no issues doing the types of things that I'm talking about here. And I'm not saying you rush out and go do these things tomorrow. This isn't the priority in your practice, is to do these types of things that help people let go of their craving. This practice is all about your journey and you getting to enlightenment. But part of you getting to enlightenment, as you become more and more wise, you can help other people and create an environment for them to let go of their cravings if they have them. And you need to be able to understand the natural law of karma very clearly. You need to understand some of these other teachings very clearly. That's why the first part of this discussion was cultivating wisdom. You need to acquire wisdom. So right now, if you're feeling uncomfortable with potentially doing some of these kinds of things, that's because of your attachment to that person. And you're maybe fearful of them getting angry, or you're going to be upset if they're upset. This is just because of your attachment to them. I wasn't attached to my wife or my son when I was doing these kinds of things. So I was completely comfortable with this, and I knew the peace and joy that I was experiencing in my mind, and I was interested in them experiencing the same thing. The last thing I was interested in is leaving them in their suffering. So I knew that this was the means to getting to that peacefulness. So the more that your mind becomes peaceful and you see the peace and the quality of that peace and joy, and you know that it's these kinds of things that are going to help your family get to that, you will realize that this is the most loving and kind thing that you could ever do. Where you guys might look at me taking a bite out of a brownie and putting it in a refrigerator as like, oh my God, that's so horrible. How could you do that? Well, that's because you're attached to seeing that, gosh, I don't want this person to be angry, but them being angry is because of their craving, and them letting go of their craving so that they are no longer angry is the best thing that you could do for them.
If I would like to, or my brothers would like to play football, for example, with me, and I think, oh, they have a craving to play football, maybe I should not play with them right now. I think better I don't do it now, because as you said, I might have too much attachment and maybe think that they're angry. But for example, if they want to play with me football and I don't want to play football, then I can say, no, today I don't want
Yeah, so there was a period of time where my son and I used to play basketball pretty regularly. This was in the past, right? Several years ago. And I noticed that he got used to him and I going to the basketball court and playing basketball together. And then there was a time where he said to me, he said, "Hey, would you like to go play basketball?" And I said, "I'm not interested in going right now. And I'm not interested in playing today." He's like, "All right, I'm not going to play either." And when he said that, I knew that he was attached because he was interested in playing, but because I wouldn't play, he didn't want to play. So I knew, he's attached. So then the very next time that he asked to play basketball, I said, "You know what? I'm going to work on the computer a little bit here. Why don't you go to the basketball court and get started, and then I will join you." Because I needed to help him start to get comfortable with playing by himself. That dad's not always going to play with you. Dad's impermanent. I'm not always going to play basketball with you. And I said, "How about you go to the basketball court and I'll join you in a few minutes?" And he said, "Okay, I'll do that." Because I knew if I said no, that he wouldn't go. So he went on his own. And then 3-5 minutes later, I joined him. And then the next time we might have did that too. And then maybe the third time he might have said, "Hey, would you like to go to the basketball court?" And I said, "Hey, why don't you go? And when I finish up here, I will come join you." Right. And then I never went and joined him. I didn't lie. I said, "When I finish up here, I will come join you." Well, I never finished. Right. And then like 30 minutes later, 45 minutes later, he came back and he didn't say anything. He didn't say like, "Why didn't you join me? I was waiting for you." He didn't do that. So I knew that he wasn't attached to me playing basketball. He had let it go. And then there were some time frames where he was interested in playing. And then he would say, "Would you like to go play?" And I'd say, "No, I'm not interested in going to play." And he would say, "Okay, I'm going to go play myself." So then I could see he had let go of the attachment. And then he would go to the playground and play himself. So I had to slowly train his mind that initially he wouldn't go at all without me. So when I saw that, then I taught him to go and then I will join him. And they did that for a few times. Then he went, he thought I was going to join him, but I didn't. And then ultimately he got to the point where he would just go by himself. So this was like the slow incremental change that his mind needed. So you can do those kinds of things with the people around you. But again, this isn't your first priority on the path to enlightenment. Your first priority is to eliminate your own cravings, desires, attachments. But when you start practicing more and more closely and you see the people around you are discontent and they're attached to you or they're attached to things around you, you can do things like this to be able to help them. And this is the most loving and kind thing that you can do. But initially, you're just getting your arms around your own practice and getting your arms around your own Eightfold Path and your own meditation and your own things like this. So don't focus on this stuff initially, but this is the kind of stuff that you can do.
Okay, I see. It seems that after 3-4 times, not deleting completely attachment, but it's quite fast. Mm-hmm. Everybody is different, right? But can it be that fast with progress?
Yeah, everybody is a little bit different, but because I worked with him when he was an infant and a toddler, cutting off his discontentedness, and he started learning when he was 6 years old, and I've done so many things, he was able to let go of a lot of his attachments pretty easily. Some of them is just 1 or 2 times. He can let them go really easily because he's young, his mind isn't that polluted. He had the benefit of when he was an infant and a toddler, his parents were helping him cut off his discontentedness. So this is one of the reasons why he can do these kinds of things. But an adult isn't going to necessarily do that so frequently. And that's why my wife, with those cups, it was just one time that I needed to do that with her. And she was able to let it go because by that point, she had been training her mind quite a bit and she was able to let that go. And it was a smaller attachment, where with her attachment to her son, I had to do a whole lot of things to help her eliminate that attachment. It took me 5 years to help her get to the point where she's eliminating that attachment. Mm-hmm. You're welcome. Yes, sir. Oh, you have a question? Nothing.
My question is what to do when you see 2 people arguing. So an example is my son comes with, we usually have a peaceful relationship at home, but sometimes he comes with a discontentedness, like, "Oh, I don't have any muscle in my body. I feel so bad. And I wish I could look better." Then Alberto's craving is he wants to see his son always happy. Mm-hmm. And then he rushes to give him ideas. "Oh, you need to do this. You need to go more to the gym. You need to eat this and that." And he's like, "No, I've done that. It doesn't work. I don't get any muscle." And they go back and forth, back and forth. And I'm in the middle and I see this is going nowhere. And I said, "Stop or I'm leaving. I'm leaving the table right now. And then it becomes an argument. So what should be my role in this situation?
Okay. So when you're saying stop or I'm going to leave, this is your craving. You don't want them to argue, right? So what you've got to do is get comfortable with their relationship is their relationship. It doesn't involve you. Your son now is 18 years old. It's different. So if I was you, I would just walk away. See, this is the threat that, hey, if you don't do what I want you to do, this is you putting your expectation on them, the threat, then I'm going to do this. Right? And you're not interested in doing that because they're only going to make that decision to stop arguing when the threat is there. And you would like them to see the wisdom behind making wise decisions. So by you just choosing to leave, they appreciate being around mom and being around wife. So if they appreciate that, when they see every time they're arguing, mom walks away, more and more, they're going to be like, hey, we don't like it when mom walks away. So why don't we stop arguing? So that's where you can maintain your contentedness and protect your doorways, that you just choose to walk away. You don't need to threaten it. You just choose to walk away. And then what I'll share with Alberto, if you allow me, Alberto, is that your son going to the gym and eating and exercising, that actually doesn't solve his problem, because in his mind at that point, he's having a craving to be something different than what he has. He doesn't have that big of a muscles, and he's wanting these big muscles. And he thinks that these big muscles are going to make his life better, not realizing that that's just his own craving. So if he went to the gym, let's just say he went to the gym, he ate and all these kinds of things, and he did bulk up, that doesn't actually solve his problem, because those muscles are impermanent. At some point, those muscles are going to go away, right? And now his mind, with that craving, he's still going to be discontent. So what you would like to do in this situation is help him cultivate wisdom and say, Alejandro, I just got to ask you a question. Does everybody in the world have big muscles? And he's going to be like, no. Like, okay, so some people have big muscles and some people don't. Is that what you're saying? Yep, that's what I'm saying. So you not having big muscles is kind of normal, right? Because some people have them and some people don't, right? So you're helping him to cultivate wisdom and see the universal truth of impermanence, that some people have it and some people don't. And this is what he's going to help him eliminate his craving, is to cultivate wisdom. Sending him to the gym or eating or bulking up, that actually isn't going to solve the problem, because he's got to let go of the craving in his mind. And in order to do that, he's got to first see impermanence, and he's got to understand impermanence, that not everybody has big muscles, and that's okay. That doesn't mean that there's anything wrong. So by helping him cultivate wisdom, asking really well-developed questions that lead him to that wisdom, that's what's going to help him, not the go to the gym, bulk up, and these kinds of things. And you can just walk away. Because their relationship is their relationship, and it's going to be whatever it is. And it's like getting in the middle between two cats and dogs, right? Like if you get in the middle, you're going to get scratched and people are going to bite you. The dogs are going to bite you. And you're not interested in spraying water on them, right? So just go away. Just, they're going to fight. They're going to fight. Let them deal with it. And then you maintain your contentedness. Mm-hmm.
So when I think about, not that I'm a father, I don't have any kids, but when I think about a family that's nurturing for growth, that's perhaps a quote unquote ideal environment for a child to grow, learn, and reach their potential, blah, 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 that kind of stuff. I think a lot about like safety and stability, certain core memories or such that are maybe foundations of examples where it's like, hey, the world is a safe place. Hey, things do have some kind of stability, not forever, but where I left my Legos, that they'll be safe. Like, so as I'm hearing about you kind of creating a bit of instability, creating a bit of the uncertainty, my mind goes to, well, wait, like, is there a certain number of years where maybe a child needs to know and to be able to trust that things are stable, consistent, that there's some certainty that my dad is not messing with me, you know, like, isn't there a bit of that where up to a certain age, like, okay, the world is a safe place, things are secure, I can trust things, and then maybe we'll explore. So I guess I'm trying to wrestle with that and just, I don't know what you have to say to that.
Yeah, there is a certain age, and it was 6 years old. For those 6 years, He got to go biking with dad. He got to do all these different things with dad. We would go down the street and take a nice walk, holding hands, going to the playground and all these kinds of things. And then at age 6, it was time to start training and helping him, right? And then the world is not a safe place. There's things out there that will harm. You will experience harm if you're causing harm. So the last thing you're interested in doing is promoting this false view that you can go out in this world and it's just a big playground and that everything's safe. That no, it's your decisions are going to lead to certain results. And if you make wise decisions, yeah, it'll lead to wholesome results. And if you make unwise decisions, it'll lead to unwholesome results. So you're not promoting the view that the world is an unsafe place. You're promoting the view that based on your decisions, you're going to experience some result, either wholesome or unwholesome. And this is really helpful because if you promote the idea that the world's a safe place and they go out into the world thinking that it's a candy land in Disney World and I can do anything and everything's going to be safe for me, this is the delusion. This is the ignorance. So he's learned that, yeah, there are harmful things that happen in the world, but those harmful things are happening based on unwise decisions. And the very best thing that can protect you is your wisdom and making wise decisions that lead to wholesome results. And for me, it was age 6 where I was like, all right, now he needs some formal training because we've already been doing these things with him for a period of time that he wasn't aware of that we were doing. But now let's make sure he's consciously aware of these types of things. Because at age 6, one of the things that I noticed is that he was starting to have a turbulent relationship with his mom, that they were talking bad to each other and they would have difficulties because of their attachment. He would get angry with her and she would get angry with him and they would argue like what you're experiencing. They would argue back and forth with each other. And here I am looking at them arguing like, this isn't the kind of family that I'm interested in having. So let me figure out how I can help him. Let me figure out how I can help her. And then together they can get rid of this attachment and then they can get to this more peace and more joy. Now there's no arguing in our family at all. There's just peace and love and joy and all these kinds of things. But if I were to promote the view that the world's a safe place and try to keep things permanent in the home, when he goes out into the world and he sees that things aren't that way, now he doesn't have the wisdom of how to deal with the world.
So then, given that there is impermanence and that the world is messy, for lack of a better term, and not like perfectly safe, sunshine, rainbows, is there something then that a child can kind of hang on to internally, perhaps, whether it's like Buddha's teachings or understanding the true nature of the world? Is there something that kind of anchors a child? And this coming from if a child thinks everything is just in flux and chaotic, that can be a cause of a lot of anxiety, no?
It's only going to be a cause of anxiety if there's a craving for permanence, right? If they have a craving for permanence and they see constant change and they don't understand the universal truth of impermanence and they have a craving for permanence, yeah, they'll have anxiety. But if they understand the world is full of constant change, not chaotic necessarily, but constant change, and they don't have a craving for permanence, then they can be peaceful and joyful. So there's times where like he goes to school and he comes home and I'm like, hey, how'd school go? He's like, oh, it was wonderful. I was like, what happened? He's like, oh, this was happening and this was happening and this was happening. I was like, oh, that's different than they used to do it. He's like, yep, sure is. It's different. They do things differently. And then he sometimes shares with me about how his friends were really upset and really stressed and really having lots of problems with these changes that were happening at the school, where he was just like, no big deal, because he understood that this is just impermanence. So if you give them the impression that things are stable and steady and there's no change, when they're in the world experiencing all this change, yes, they will have anxiety. But if you teach them about impermanence and constant change and introduce more impermanence into their life and teach them not to crave permanence, then when they're in the world experiencing impermanence, because they will experience it, then they can be completely content with it and peaceful and just know that it's normal.
So then if we go to the other extreme, right, of maybe a home that was extra chaotic, extreme, maybe lots of yelling, fighting, super unsafe, more unsafe than the actual world that they're living in, then would you say that that's almost like super training them to handle, do you know what I mean? Like, so now there's like a certain maybe unrealistic home environment that's not representative of the outer world. And so would you then say it's like, well, if you can make it through there, you can make it anywhere?
So these are the two extremes that the unenlightened mind will typically see, right? Like creating this ultimate, stable, steady, trying to create permanence in our child's life, versus now there's this hostile, chaotic environment where just all kinds of things are happening. And what I'm teaching you is this middle way. There's this middle way where you can help them to understand impermanence. But this chaotic life that you're describing, that we may or may not have experienced in our childhood, there are certain things about that environment that do help us to be able to prepare in the world, but I don't suggest that that's the type of environment to create for a child, because that's not what's going to create a balanced mind and create an individual who can be stable in the world. What's going to create stability in the world for a child is to train their mind to understand impermanence. When they understand impermanence and they're not craving permanence, their mind can be stable and steady. But as long as their mind doesn't understand impermanence and they're craving permanence and they're over here where the parents are trying to create this routine and this constant stability, then when they're in the world and they're experiencing impermanence, their mind's going to be shaken up by that and they won't understand it. So that's why they're at home and you have the ability to work with them and guide them, introducing impermanence is actually really helpful for them, because they're going to experience plenty of impermanence in the world. And if you can guide them through that and helping them cultivate the wisdom around it, when they're experiencing the impermanence, they'll be able to deal with it with no problem.
I mean, I guess I'm trying to put that super chaotic environment just because I think most people probably don't have that strategically nurturing, creating impermanence, safe way kind of an environment. I think a lot of people have the environment where it is super chaotic, unsafe, maybe some might even call it abusive or whatever. I think I'm trying to put that into context of maybe what a lot of people have experienced growing up, where it was not the ideal.
Yeah. And that's why I'm teaching this. Right, because I'm interested in seeing more and more people to be able to experience this, because I grew up in a very hostile and aggressive and difficult environment, and I'm not interested in that continuing in the world, right? So I would like to see more and more people understand that, hey, there's this middle way of how to guide your children, because we don't grow up understanding these kinds of things. These are things that I learned through the teachings of the Buddha, through observing Thai people and seeing how they do things in certain situations. So this is that guidance to now bring into the world in the English-speaking community, because Thai people understand these kinds of things very well, right? They know not to force their children to do things, and they know these kinds of things, and they've been practicing it for a long time. But unless you speak Thai and you're living in a Thai household, you wouldn't learn those things. So since I've been around Thai people now for 22 years, I do speak a little bit of Thai. I can observe what's going on, and I can learn the teachings of the Buddha, and I've seen the results in my own life of how these things have worked. Now I'm sharing these teachings so that anybody who has a chaotic environment, they can bring it to the middle. But anybody who's over here who's trying to create an ultimate, stable, steady, permanent environment for their children, they can come to the middle too, and now they can see the better way to live life. And that's what the Buddha taught, is this better way of life. It's not a religion, it's not rules and commandments or rites or rituals and ceremonies of worship. It's this better way of life. And you need to be able to cultivate that wisdom of how to live that better way of life. And then when you see it works, like Alberto did yesterday, when you see the things I'm sharing with you work, you're like, oh yeah, this is the truth. This is really the way to live this better way of life. And then slowly but surely, you integrate this into your life, and now it becomes second nature. Because if you raise your children this way, when they have children, they're going to do the same thing, right? And then it just spreads into the world. This is how teachings spread in the world, because if you learn the truth, and now you're teaching your children the truth, they're going to teach their children the truth too. You're not going to just be like, oh, I learned this really important thing that is deep in wisdom and it's completely transformed my life, and I'm not going to share it with anybody, right? This isn't what you're going to do as a parent when you share it with your children, and your children see how impactful it is for their life. They're going to share it with their children. And then generation after generation, this is how the teaching spread in Thailand. They've been here for 800 to 1200 years. At one point, nobody in Thailand understood these teachings at all. And there was a group of people who came to Thailand and started sharing these teachings. And now 800 years later, wow, we've got all these practitioners that are understanding these teachings. And we can do the same thing in the Western world. It just takes people like you to decide, like, hey, I would like to learn these things for my own mind, and then I'm going to help other people as they need help. And then this is how that slowly spreads in the world.
Oh, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Okay, so you guys ready to learn more? Let me see if we have anything online. All right. So now some more about how to guide your children. Be prepared for detours, right? When you're being fun and creative and you have certain things that are going on, be prepared for detours. Because let's just say you're getting your children ready for school. And let's just say you've made them food. Let's just say you live in a cold environment. They put on their winter boots, they put on their jackets, they put on their gloves, and now you're putting them into the car in order to head to school. And let's just say one of your children slap one of the other children, or they say something negative and degrading and disparaging. Well, if you have a craving to hurry up and get to work and hurry up and get to school, you're just going to brush past that and you're going to keep on going in your day. But this is unwise. You'd like to put a pause on this situation. Hold on a second, little Billy and Susie or whatever their names are, right? Let's stop for a moment. You just hit your sister. Is this a wise thing to do? Is this the way that we're going to be treating each other in our family? Are we hitting each other? Is that how we would like to interact with each other? Right? You're going to need to put a pause on this and take a detour and have a little 2-minute lesson here for little Billy to learn that he shouldn't hit his sister, Susie, right? But if you have a craving to go and hurry up and get to school, you're going to overlook that and you're going to miss the opportunity to share a teaching that's going to help them. And then guess what? The next day, Billy's going to hit Susie again and again and again and again. It's just going to keep going over and over and over again. And you're trying to break this cycle by helping little Billy to gain some wisdom that it's unwise to hit your sister. And here's the reason why, because you're creating this unwholesome consequence or this unwholesome result. So be prepared for detours, because every moment is a teachable moment. Where you see your child struggling or you're seeing they're having difficulties, use it as an opportunity to teach them. Always be supportive and encouraging and uplifting, right? Sometimes what we do in life, particularly if we were parented this way, is we tell them all the bad things they're doing, all the negative things they're doing, the negative reinforcement, constantly showing them all the wrong things that they're doing. What you would like to do is 98% of the time, be showing them all the great things that they're doing. And not by like making a big hoopla out of it, right? But by just complimenting them for the things that they're doing. Usually my son at home, when he's playing PlayStation, he's got the volume up really loud and it's like boom, 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 right? Well, last night he was getting ready to play and he started playing just for like 2 or 3 seconds. And he turned to me and he said, "Dad, is this too loud? Is this a decent volume for you?" And I said, "You know what, son? That's very polite of you to check with me. That's really kind of you." Because normally for the last couple of years, it's me and his mom telling him to turn it down, right? His mom's upstairs sleeping and he's ba 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 ba, right? So we're having to say, "Hey, would you mind turn that down?" But last night he checked with me and I was like, "Hey, this was really wise. This was really wonderful that you did this." So you like to compliment them and show them, but you're not like, "Wow, you're such a perfect human being. Look what you did. Wow." You're not trying to do that kind of thing, but you're just trying to give this positive reinforcement. Because if you sprinkle some popcorn or you sprinkle some breadcrumbs along the trail that you're trying to lead them to and show them like, "Hey, you're on the right path here. You checked in with somebody to make sure that you're not having the volume too loud, and this was really wise of you." It's like sprinkling the breadcrumbs along the trail and leading them to this improved decision making. So if 98% of the time you're giving them this positive reinforcement, every once in a while, when you need to sit down and talk to them about something that they've done quote unquote unwise or wrong or bad or something like this, it won't feel so detrimental to them because you've been so positive and so supportive and so uplifting. When you need to talk about those really hard topics, they're going to be more willing to talk to you about it. Whereas if 98% of the time you're negative and degrading and diminishing and, downing them, you're not going to be able to guide this child very easily because they're used to this constant negative bombardment from you. So be positive and encouraging and uplifting with them. Focus on improved decision making, not disparaging them as an individual. So whenever my son has done something unwise, we talk about how his decisions are unwise. I don't talk about him being stupid or an idiot or you are wrong. Right? It's more like, "Hey, I think your decision here could be a bit wiser." right? I think that what you're deciding to do here isn't the best decision. Let's talk about this a bit. We're always talking about is improved decision making rather than him as a person. So we're not degrading him as a person or diminishing him as a person. We're talking about his decision making and how that needs to be improved and how that needs to become wiser. Him as an individual, as a person, we love him unconditionally, no matter what he does. We just love him as the way he is. But let's talk about these decisions that you're making. These need to be improved, and let's discuss those. So discuss the improved decision making, not disparaging them as an individual. You're going to need to eliminate any anger or aggression you have towards your children. If you're noticing you're angry and you're trying to rush in there, and whether it's your children or your employees or your parents or your neighbors, you're not interested in doing that, right? Sometimes we've been hit as children, we've been abused or maybe spanked or what have you, and that was the discipline that we got as a child. This doesn't work. It just promotes fear in your child's mind. At the age of 8, I was being hit all through my childhood, but at the age of 8, I told myself, if I ever have children, I will never hit them whatsoever. And no matter what he's ever done in his life, I've never raised my hand at him ever. I've never even had that feeling or that inclination to do it, because I know it's only going to promote fear in his mind, because I know what I experienced as a kid growing up. So hitting and fearing your children into doing things isn't actually going to work. So if you have anger, aggression, or hostility in your own mind, that's not the proper time to talk. That's why the Eightfold Path is so important, and to understand the 5 factors of well-spoken speech, that you're not interested in going in and trying to teach your child a lesson if you're angry and you're hostile and you're bitter, because there's some craving that has arisen in your mind. It's producing this anger, and this isn't the proper time to talk. So wait until you calm down. Even if that's a couple of hours or a couple of days, then go talk when your mind's calm. And that's what you would like to be able to do. There's a difference between firm speech and harsh speech, right? The Buddha teaches you not to have harsh speech. This is your tone, your tempo, and your word choice. You're going to need to pay attention to your tone, tempo, and word choice and eliminate harsh speech with everybody, including your children, your employees, your neighbors, and all these people. But there is something called firm speech that I've used with my son from time to time. I don't use it with students. I don't use it with employees. I don't use it with other people. But with my son, I use firm speech. And what firm speech is I'm just changing my tone just a little bit. It's still not harsh. So I'll give you an example. So I might say in a gentle way, multiple times, "Hey, Bailan, this lying is not helpful. You need to stop lying. This is really unwise. This is going to cause you problems in life," right? So this is what I might say in a gentle way. And after I've done that many, 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 many times, and we had many discussions about it, it might become, "Hey, Bailan, this lying really needs to stop. You're lying and you're going to have these negative consequences, and you're not going to be able to have a good life if you're constantly lying," right? So just a little bit firmed up. I'm not yelling, I'm not hollering, I'm just firming it up and looking him straight in the eyes so he knows how important this is. So you can do this from time to time with your children, but you're not interested in relying on that. You would like to spend, 3, 4, 5, 6 times building wisdom to make sure that they understand the wisdom, and then you might need to go to a little bit of firm speech every once in a while so they understand how serious it is. But it's not harsh speech. You're not being aggressive and bitter and harsh. It's just firming up your tone a little bit so they know how important it is. And there's probably not anybody else that you would be interested in doing this with. You're not interested in doing it with your parents, with your siblings, with your students, with your employees. That is not helpful in that situation. But with a child, sometimes you need to get their attention, right? You need to get their attention. You need to firm it up just a little bit. As we've been talking at different times, your goal is to impart wisdom. Your goal isn't to force their behavior. Your goal isn't to put expectations on them and try to control them. Your goal is to help them cultivate wisdom and guide them in cultivating that wisdom. And as they do, then they're going to make those decisions wisely, whether you're there or not, because they see the wise decision making in that wisdom. But if you're forcing or you're putting your expectations, they're only going to make those decisions as long as you're there. And you're impermanent in their life, so it's not going to be a consistent decision. So by them cultivating wisdom, it'll be a consistent decision because they see the wisdom and making the decision that way. there's oftentimes these little mini lessons and then repeated tasks that you're going to be able to do. There's a microphone on cracking somewhere. If you guys could check your mics, make sure they're turned off. There's these little mini lessons that you might decide to do because, you guys, you're sitting down in the temple and we're learning from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. And as adults, you guys can sit down and do that in this long intellectual learning. But with a child, you can't really do that with them. They're going to need these little mini lessons. So there's many times where I taught my son where we were just maybe driving down the street in a car, we're walking down the street, and it's a little 15-second lesson here and a 30-second lesson here. And he's learned a lot that way. So you can implement these little lessons into their life little by little like that. So sometimes when we were learning about impermanence and he was learning about impermanence, we'd be driving down the street. And I know this might sound a little bit horrific to you guys, but this is part of the teaching, is there might be a dead animal on the side of the road. And he would see the dead animal and he's like, oh my goodness, there's a dead dog on the side of the road. And I would say, oh yeah, there is. Why is that? He's like, well, they're dead. And I was like, yeah, what is that? What is it from the teachings of the Buddha that help you understand that? And he's like, oh, they're impermanent. And I'm like, yep, that's exactly why they died. Because they were born, they have to die, they're impermanent. And now we're off, we're continuing to go to the mall, right? There's just this little 15-second, 30-second thing. Or maybe the sunshine's coming out and the sun's blaring into the car through the window. And then all of a sudden, the clouds come in and block the sun. And he's like, whoa, what happened? What is that? And I was like, I don't know. What explains that? What explains that once it was sunny and now it's cloudy? What is that in the teachings of the Buddha that explain that? And then he's like, oh, impermanence. Oh, I see. Right? So you can use these little mini lessons like this. Okay. Then in terms of like repeating tasks, I'll share this one with you. One time I knew that he was attached to Sprite, right? There was this drink, the Sprite, the soda that he was attached to. I knew he was attached to it. So we used to pick him up at school. In this one school that he was at, it was a 45-minute drive home. So we tended to bring him food and meet him at school with this food. So I had this Sprite waiting for him and I had his food waiting for him. And he got into the car and he was getting ready to drink his Sprite. And I said, hey, can I have a drink? Can I have a sip? Right? Because I'm interested in him letting it go and practicing generosity. And he said, here you go. You can have a sip. So then I take the Sprite from him and I put it up to my lips and I haven't even drank it yet. And I wasn't even interested in drinking it. I was just interested to see if he would share it. I wasn't even planning to drink it. I just put it up to my lips. And right away he's like, gosh, you're drinking so much. Why are you drinking so much? He got really discontent. He got really angry at me. And I was like, oh, you don't want me drinking this? He was like, you're drinking so much. You said you were going to take a sip. You didn't say you were going to drink that much. And I actually hadn't even drank any at all. I just put it up to my lips. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, since you want this to be yours and you're not willing to share it, you know what? I'm going to give it to mommy. When we get home, I'm going to give it to mommy. So I put it in my cup holder, and we are in the parking lot at this point, and I put it in my cup holder, and I said, I'm going to give it to mommy. And of course, he got really angry. He started turning red. He started yelling. He was even spitting. This was the maddest I've ever seen him get. He got so mad about this Sprite. And we were actually on our way to soccer practice. And I said, you know what? I don't think your mind's in a good condition to go to soccer practice. So why don't we just go home? Even though his mom had paid for this is the detour. We took a detour. We didn't go to soccer practice. We went home, right? And over the ride home, he got calm. And then when we got home, we talked about it and we discussed it. And he understood that he was having a craving and he needed to let this go and that it was unwise for him to do this. And dad had bought him many Sprites and he should be willing to share and these kinds of things, right? Well, that was the little lesson that he had. But then we repeated this task. So the next day when I picked him up, after a teaching in this wisdom, I had another Sprite waiting for him. And he opens the door to the car and he sees the Sprite and he looks at the Sprite and he looks at me and he looks at the Sprite and he's like, oh, this is what we're doing? I was like, yep, this is what we're doing. And he's like, okay. So then he gets in the car and then I said, can I have a sip of your Sprite? And he said, sure, here you go. And I said, how much can I drink? And he says, as much as you'd like. You can have as much as you like. And I was like, okay, I really am not interested in any at all. So here you go. And I gave it back to him. And we did this a few times. And we went out to restaurants. He had some Sprites and I would ask him to drink it. So it wasn't just that one time. And I was like, all right, done. I needed to keep testing it. I needed to keep making sure that he was actually eliminating this craving and it was completely gone. So once you teach a lesson, you would like to follow it back up with another situation where they can apply that wisdom right away. Because if you teach them something and then they don't apply that wisdom for 3 weeks or 4 weeks, they will forget. So since we had just had that situation the night before, and because I taught it to him at home calmly in the living room and he understood it, and we had a great lesson, the very next day I followed it up, giving him an opportunity to put that wisdom into practice. And now that wisdom became real wisdom that he had on board because he got to practice it. He didn't just talk about it, he got to implement it in his life that very next day. So when you teach your children certain things, you would like to follow that up with a certain thing that they can actually apply that wisdom right away. And then that'll solidify it in their mind to be able to now have it on board as consistent wisdom long term. Use the Eightfold Path as your guide. This provides the complete perfect plan to help you. So if you're guiding your children about how to speak to their mom or their siblings or their teachers or things like this, teach them the right speech. Teach them those things. So there's times where he would be speaking with his mom and I would walk in and it looks like they're about to argue and they're not quite arguing yet, but it looks like it's headed in that direction. And I would step in and I would say, hey, pause. Let's pause this for a second, Bailan. Let's stop for a second. What you just said to your mom, was that the 5 factors of well-spoken speech? And he's like, I don't know. And I was like, okay, well, let's go through the 5 factors. Did you speak at the right time? He's like, yeah. She's willing to talk to me. I was like, was it true? Yeah, it was true. And I was like, was it gentle? Maybe not, Dad. Maybe it wasn't gentle. And I was like, okay, was it beneficial? He's like, no. Was it with the mind of loving kindness? He's like, no, I was kind of angry when I was talking to her. I was like, all right, perfect. So now, why don't you do it again? And now you can be more gentle, beneficial, and more with the mind of loving kindness. So I was like, all right, action, back. And we kind of like laugh and joke, right? We're playing around and he's like trying to put together the words because he's essentially rewiring his mind to no longer be bitter and harsh and hostile with his mom. He's learning to be loving and kind. And then sometimes he would do it again and I'll be like, that wasn't quite loving enough. It was gentle and it was beneficial, but I didn't hear the loving kindness in there. Let's do this a third time. Let's get the loving kindness to come out. And I would pretend like I'm a director of a movie, right? And then like mom's laughing and he's laughing and we're having a good time. And now he's like, all right. So now he'll start practicing to be a little bit more loving. So you can do these kinds of things where you use the Eightfold Path and they learn the Eightfold Path, they know the Eightfold Path, and then you can step in and give them that real time training to show them and have fun with it. Be creative with it, right? It's helpful to teach life skills to your children, right? Because you're going to be teaching them many things. You're going to be teaching them about right speech, right action, and all the things on the Eightfold Path, but they also need life skills. They need to know how to cook and clean and sew and these kinds of things as well. So you can teach them life skills. This is part of the wisdom that they need to live this better way of life. Yes, they need to learn right speech and right action and all these other things, and that's one collection of teachings that they're going to need to know, but they need to know to do laundry. They need to know how to scrub a floor. They need to know how to, do these different things. So teach them life skills as well. This is going to help them in life. You can also teach them how to base their relationships on the 5 precepts, where when they're choosing friends and they're choosing companions, that it's wise to look at the 5 precepts. So if you've taught them the 5 precepts, this can be a guide for them that if they have friends that are killing or stealing or having sexual misconduct or lying or taking intoxicants, you can teach them how it's unwise to have these kind of friends, okay? It's important not to punish your children. Sometimes we're taught to punish, right? When we're punishing our children, this comes off in a certain way that's very detrimental, and now they look at you as you're punishing them. Instead, what I do is I spend time talking and having discussions, and then as you talk and discuss, there might be 3, 4, 5, 6 discussions to make sure he has the wisdom. And then there might be something I need to do in order to get his attention. And that might mean taking the computer, or that might mean that he can't play PlayStation anymore, or he can't watch TV. But it's never a punishment. And what it is it's like, okay, Bailan, we've talked about lying about 5 times now. And you know that it's unwise to lie, right? And he's like, yeah. Is there anything about lying that you don't understand that you need Dad to teach you about? No, I understand it, Dad, but I just keep lying and I can't stop lying. Okay, well, if you lie again, what do you think we should do? I think I need to get your attention here because obviously you're lying, and maybe we need to get rid of the computer for a few days, or maybe we need to get rid of PlayStation for a few days. What do you think would be wise that if you lie again, what would be the consequences? And he's like, you know what? I think I should lose the computer for this amount of time. Okay, I agree. That's probably a good idea, because then during that time when you're not using the computer, you can be thinking about how unwise it is that you were lying. So setting up these consequences and even letting him be involved and doing it. So now when he lies and I see that he's lying, he already knows what's going to happen because he's the one who's decided it. So you can use this where you're not punishing them. What I'm sharing with them is, hey, I need to get your attention here. You need to take a computer out of the mix. You need to take a PlayStation out of the mix. You need to take something out of the mix so that you can get your mind around how unwise it is to lie and these other things. So you can teach these kinds of things. It's helpful to reward good conduct. Not every single time, but it's wise to reward good conduct. That where you see them doing wise things, reward that. And some of your reward can just be, hey, good job, high five. Or it can be a hug, or it can be a little rub on the head. Or it might be, let's go to the movies. Hey, you did a really good job with that report card. You got good grades. Let's go to the movie. You would have went to the movie anyway. So why not connect it to these good grades and show them like, hey, you got some really wholesome game here. Let's go to a movie. And then there's the opposite side too. Sometimes he'll ask me something. He'll say, hey, can I do this? And I was like, I don't know if you have wholesome enough game to do that. I think you need to build up your game a little bit before we go do something like that. So you can connect the decisions that you're making about candy or cookies or cakes or going to the movies, you can connect it to certain conduct, right? So like sometimes he asks like, hey, Dad, can I get a bag of chips from 7-Eleven? And I would have bought him the bag of chips anyway, but I just connect it to something that he's been doing wisely. I'll say, hold on a second. Let me think, Bailan. Yesterday you talked really nice to your mom. I saw you washing the dishes and you put away the dishes too. You know what? Yeah, if you'd like that bag of chips, sure, we'll get that bag of chips. Again, I would have bought him the bag of chips anyway, but I'm just taking that little mini lesson and I'm taking this reward and I'm putting it together and I'm showing him like, hey, you're making these wise decisions, so sure, I'll buy you that bag of potato chips, right? Again, I would have bought him the bag of potato chips anyway. I'm not going to hold food back from him just because he's making unwise decisions somewhere, but I'm just using it as an opportunity to teach him a little lesson that, hey, yeah, you're talking nicely to your mom, you're doing these things, you're helping, yeah, I'll get you the bag of potato chips. So you can reward these kinds of things. Don't assume that you know the full story, because with children, you might sometimes walk in and you don't know the full story. And if you're clinging to your perception, what a perception is the way things seem to be, you might be making unwise decisions based on false truths in your beliefs. So say, for example, you've asked your child to clean the room and they've gone to the room and they're going to go now clean the room and they've got the door closed and they've been in there for an hour or two doing something. And now let's just say you walk in and you open the door and there's like something spread out all over the floor. And your assumption or your perception you're clinging to is they haven't cleaned their room. And now you might go in there, you might be angry because you're clinging to this perception that they haven't cleaned their room. When in reality, what might have happened is they might have cleaned the room in the last hour or two. And right before you walked in, they might have bumped into something and it spread this thing all over the floor, because you weren't there the whole time. So if you cling to the perception that they didn't clean their room, you might be making some unwise decisions in this situation. So if you walk in and you see something spread out all over their floor, you'd like to start asking questions. Hey, I noticed there's stuff all over the floor. What happened? And they might say, oh, I cleaned my room, but this just happened right before you walked in. And it's like, oh, okay, so what are you going to do now? Oh, I'm about to clean this up. Oh, okay, great, perfect, right? Done. You don't need to like, hey, I told you to clean your room, and why didn't you clean your room? And da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. This is just creating a problem. So don't cling to your perceptions. I'll tell you about this in terms of something I think you can understand even more is police officers are trained not to cling to their perceptions. This is part of police training. That if you were a police officer and you got a call on the radio that down at the convenience store at 7-Eleven, there's somebody with a gun and we would like you to go there and take care of this situation. Well, let's just say you show up as a police officer at the 7-Eleven and you see somebody in a black hoodie with a gun standing over somebody and somebody's laying on the floor bleeding and you have this person with the black hoodie holding the gun. Well, if you cling to your perceptions, you might walk in and just start shooting the guy with the gun. You might have just killed an innocent person if you cling to your perceptions, because that might actually be the cashier. The cashier might have gotten the gun away from the robber, and now they just shot the robber, and the robber is the one bleeding out on the floor. So police officers are taught not to cling to their perceptions, because you can end up in jail. Because if you just shot the innocent person, you're going to jail for the rest of your life, probably as a police officer, right? But what the police officers are trained to do is when you show up to the scene, you pull your gun and you say, "Put down the gun, police, police, put down your gun." And if that's the good person, so to speak, they would see the police and say, "Oh, thank goodness you're here. I'm going to put down my gun." But if it's the robber, they're going to turn and point the gun towards the police, and then that's when they're going to shoot you, right? So I know this is a pretty graphic example, but it'll help you remember to not cling to your perception. That when you cling to your perception, you're going to make unwise decisions based on these false truths. What a perception is the way things seem to be in the world. If you make decisions based on the way things seem to be in the world, you're not making decisions based on the way things are in the world. You would like to make decisions based on the way things are in the world, based on the truth, right? So don't cling to your perception about your children, about your employees, about your parents or your siblings. When you walk into a situation, if you haven't seen it and you haven't heard it, you don't know the truth, because you didn't see it and you didn't hear it, right? All you did is walked into your child's room and you just see that there's stuff on the floor. You have no idea how it got there, right? So you didn't see it, you didn't hear it. So therefore you've got to ask questions so that you don't cling to your perceptions. So you should do this in all parts of your life, not just with your children, but in other situations. If you didn't see it and you didn't hear it, you don't know the truth yet. So ask questions to be able to ensure you're not clinging to your perceptions. Location and position when you're talking to your children are really important, particularly with younger children. Not that you're above your children and your children are below you, but children tend to listen when their parents are sitting on a sofa, for example, or a chair, and the children are on the floor. When there's some big serious talk that I need to have with my son, he comes over and he sits on the floor. And then I'm talking to him, and I'm not talking down to him, and he's not below me, but he's just in a certain position that allows his mind to absorb what it is that I have to say. When he comes and sits next to me on the sofa, we're relaxed, we're talking, we're jovial, we're talking about little simple things. But when there's something serious we need to talk about, he will come over and sit on the floor. And initially I had to teach him to come over and sit on the floor. But now he knows when something's real serious. He knows to come over and sit on the floor. So the position that you sit is really important. Whereas if you sit on the same level as your children, they're going to tend to not internalize what it is you have to say as readily. So if you have younger children, it's better for them to sit on the floor when you're talking. Okay? Let's see. It's helpful to know that you can be friendly with your children, but you're not their friend. Sometimes in Western culture, we like to be our child's friend. Well, your children have friends, and they're going to need friends, and they're going to function with their friends and interact with their friends very differently than they interact with their parents. Their parents provide a different role than their friends, right? With their friends, they're going to function in one way, and with their parents, they're going to function a different way. And you're interested in maintaining that parent-child relationship. If you become or try to become your children's friend, they're going to treat you very differently, and they're going to look at you very differently, and they're not going to necessarily heed your advice in the same way. So maintaining that parent-child relationship is really helpful, realizing that you can be friendly, but you're not their friend. There's a very different role that you're playing in their life than a friend. It's helpful to allow your child to understand true love, because when they understand what true love is, then they can understand your love more readily. If they think all the gifts and all the presents and all the money and all those kinds of things is your love, then when you're not able to provide those anymore, they're not going to understand. There was a time frame where when my son was very young, I was more wealthy, and when we would go to the mall, every time we would go to the mall, I would get him a toy. We basically would park in a place where we would walk past the toy store, and every single time he would get a toy. And I had to teach him that this wasn't the love. After I wasn't as wealthy anymore and I wasn't able to buy him toys like that, now he very rarely gets toys. So he's learned that these toys don't represent the love, right? So you're going to need to help your child understand unconditional love. And one of the best ways to help them understand that is for you to understand it and for you to practice it. When you're practicing unconditional love, they will learn that from you. But if you look at the love, or they look at the love as the toys, the gifts, the money, the trips, the things like that. Someday, if those things go away, they're going to think that you don't love them anymore. So you would like them to see that unconditional love. It's helpful to communicate love, yes, through your speech, but you can also communicate love through your actions, right? It's helpful to say that you love your children and let them hear that, but you need to communicate love through your actions. Times we only say it in our words, but you need to show them through your actions. So by you cultivating more and more unconditional love, your actions will emanate from that unconditional love, and your actions will speak much louder than your words. And also, loving your child doesn't mean you give them everything that they want. Sometimes we think that that's what love is give your child everything they want. And there's certain situations where my son wants something and I could very easily afford that thing, and I actually don't get it for him intentionally. So he doesn't get used to always getting what he wants from dad. So loving your child doesn't mean they always get what they want. If you have multiple children, be sure that you treat them equally. As we talked about with equanimity, that you treat all your children fairly and equally. As we talked in the previous discussion, quality time versus quantity of time is very important, that you spend quality time with your children. And this goes for your employees and your coworkers and your neighbors and your family as well. If you have shared custody, and this is the last thing with this topic, if you have shared custody with an ex-partner, if you're practicing the teachings and you're training your children to understand these teachings, but now they go to your partner's home for the weekend or for a week or so or what have you, and that person isn't practicing the teachings, what you're going to notice is when they come back, they're not going to be practicing the teachings as closely, because when they were with you, they were learning right speech and right action, and they were learning loving kindness and compassion and non-attachment and all these other things. But then when they go to your partner's place, they're not learning those things, and they might be indulging in their cravings, and they might be arguing and fighting and doing all these kinds of things. So you can know that when they come home to you and you start spending time with them, that their practice is going to backslide. And you're just going to need to be patient with this, because you can't control your ex-partner. You couldn't control when you were together, and you're not going to be able to control them when you're apart. So whatever they do in their household, that's their decisions. But when you come home and their children come home, just understand that they're going to backslide a bit, and you're going to need to pay attention to that and just be patient with it. And along those lines is your children are going to be influenced by other people when they go to school. If they have friends or they're in an environment where there's lots of ego, your children are going to come home with ego. If they go to school and the children are fighting and festering and arguing, they're going to come home with some of those influences. So you're going to need to be patient with that too, and help them see wise decision making when they're coming home. You're going to need to teach them excitement versus enjoyment, because excitement is a conditioned feeling. Like if you're used to, like say with young kids, sometimes parents, when they come home, they get all excited, like, yay, mommy's home, daddy's home. Oh, we're so excited because mommy and daddy are home. Well, if you allow their mind to do that and you incentivize that, when you're gone, they're going to be sad. They're going to miss you. Right? So if you allow that kind of thing to go on, then your mind's going to go up and then it's going to go down when you're gone. So you're not interested in that. So when, like, my wife goes away to America for 2 or 3 months, when she comes home, it's not like, yay, mommy's home, everything's better now. It's like, we go to the airport, we pick up mom. Hey, mom, hugs, kiss, wise, whatever we're going to do. Would you like something to eat? Let's go out. Right? It's like, all right, it's just another day, right? There doesn't have to be all this excitement, right? And we can enjoy our time together, but we don't need to have this conditional excitement. And this will help them to not go up and then crash back down. The human mind works very much like an animal through the praise and reward system. Just like an animal, if you're teaching an animal like a dog to shake hands or lay down and roll over and you give them a reward, they're going to tend to do that thing. They're going to tend to repeat that behavior. So if you do this kind of thing with your children, it will help them too. So when you see them doing things that are wise, every once in a while, reward that behavior. You can reward that, and they're going to tend to do that more often. This goes in line with not being degrading and diminishing, because if you only give them attention when they're doing something negative and you degrade and diminish them, they're going to tend to do those things more frequently. But if you can praise and reward them, not overly praise, because then their conceit's going to arise, but you just let them know that they're doing a good job in a particular thing, and maybe you do a particular thing to reward their conduct, you'll see that they'll tend to do those things more readily and repeatedly. Okay, so any questions on anything that I've talked about here? This is everything on this particular topic. But if you guys would like to go deeper, we can go deeper on anything you'd like.
The last thing with, using words, hugs, kisses as rewards, the first thing that came to mind was like, wait, that seems like conditional love. Like, could a child interpret that as, oh, if I obey and behave, then I will be loved. Therefore, I have to do what mommy and daddy tell me to do.
No, because in other situations, you're just giving them hugs and kisses just for no reason. Right? So like you just see them laying on the floor watching TV and you just walk over to them and you give them a hug. And even if they ask you like, why are you hugging me? Well, just because I love you. No reason, just because I love you. So you integrate all of that stuff. This isn't the only time that you're giving. If this was the only time, then yeah, that's what that would promote. But you would like to do other things like that. They're going to bed. Like, hey, I'd like to give you a kiss. If they ask you why, because I love you. I just would like to give you a kiss.
Got it. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we can continue about this after lunch break, but if you could elaborate more about excitement versus enjoyment, sometimes I have a struggle to distinguish the two of them.
I'm sorry?
Between the difference between excitement versus enjoyment.
Okay.
Approaching activities or persons or food.
Yeah, so excitement is that conditional pleasant feeling that because we're doing this thing, we're going to get so excited now. Where instead what you would like to do is go do this thing, enjoy it, and then when it's over, it's done. And there doesn't have to be this excitement. There can be fun, there can be laughter, there can be all those kinds of things, but there's not a conditional pleasant feeling in the mind. I don't know if you guys have ever experienced this because I don't know where you are in your training, but you're going to need to be able to observe the mind with your mindfulness where you can learn how to enjoy something and have fun with it without a conditional pleasant feeling. And this is going to take a certain amount of mindfulness to be aware of the mind, to be able to see like, hey, I just enjoyed this thing, but there wasn't a conditioned pleasant feeling. Because if you're enjoying it, that means you can walk away from it and you're done with it and your mind isn't still longing, yearning for it. Whereas if you're excited about something, when it's over, it's like, oh, we got to go home now. Oh, man, I wish we could stay longer. These kinds of things is promoting craving, desire, attachment, where it's like, oh, we just played miniature golf. That was fun. What are we going to do now? Oh, let's go get something to eat. Okay, let's go get something to eat. And done. Been there, done that. Done and over with, let it go. But we had a lot of fun while we were doing it, and now we're off to do something else. So you got to observe the mind to see how you can have fun without conditional excitement. And I don't know if you've had those experiences yet. Mm-hmm. All right, so basically it's 12:30. When we come back from lunch, we're going to do meditation, but then I'm going to teach you this: developing and maintaining relationships, choosing wholesome friends and a life partner. So right now, since it's basically 12:30, let's come back at 2 o'clock, give you an hour and a half, because this topic is not too long. It's more about you guys asking questions, and we'll do our meditation. So enjoy a full hour and a half lunch, and I'll see you guys at 2 o'clock. Okay, so thank you for the discussion, and enjoy your lunch. We'll see you afterwards.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To provide support for this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha. To access more teachings, visit buddhadailywisdom.com. There, you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Remember to establish a daily, consistent meditation practice, along with learning and practicing these teachings. A well-developed meditation practice is the foundation in which to train the mind to attain enlightenment.